Namaste and welcome everyone to the 2022 Jyotish Dasha Summit. This is a live webinar event that's also being live streamed on YouTube. And we're going to discuss many exciting aspects of Dasha from many different perspectives, from some different lineages as well. We have a very esteemed panel of Sam Sadasiva Geppi, Dr. Arjun Pai, Freedom Cole, Eve Mendoza, and Visti Larsen. My deepest loved members of my Jyotish community, we're all here together to discuss the wonderful topic of Dasha. So before we get started, I just wanted to open up with some chants. I'm going to chant to Ganesh Saraswati, the eternal guru. Going to do a chant to Venus. It's a Shukra day. And chant to the Divine Mother and my Guru, Amma, Amritananda Mayama. Om Gananam Tva Ganapatim Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upama Shravastamam Jaistarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatana Shrinbanu Tibihi Siddha Sadhanam Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakayeshu Sarvada Siddhi Buddhi Shakti Sahita Shriman Mahaganati Pataye Namo Namaha Nirvignam Kuru. Om Ya Kundendu Tusharahara Tavala Ya Shurvavasravrita Ya Vina Varadanda Mandi Takara Ya Sveda Padmasana Ya Brahma Chuta Shankara Prabhratir Vahir Devai Sada Vandita Saman Batu Saraswati Bhagavati Nishesha Jajapaha. Om Guru Brahman Gurur Visnahor Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Guruhu Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Om Hima Kunda Mrinalabam Daichanam Paramam Gurum Sarva Shastra Pavaktaram Bhargavam Pranamam Yaham. Om Hima Kunda Mrinalabam Daichanam Paramam Gurum Sarva Shastra Pavaktaram Bhargavam Pranamam Yaham. Om Hima Kunda Mrinalabam Daichanam Paramam Gurum Sarva Shastra Pavaktaram Bhargavam Pranamam Yaham. Om Dram Dream Dram Saha Shukraya Namaha. 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 Om Twameva Matacha Pitta Twameva Twameva Bandhu Chasaka Twameva Twameva Vijja Dravanam Twameva Twameva Sarvam Amriteshwari Namaha. Twameva Sarvam Amriteshwari Namaha. Twameva Sarvam Amriteshwari Namaha. Hari Om Namah Shivaya. Namaste. Welcome everyone to the Jyotish Dasha Summit. We're very excited for our event today. And without any further ado, I would welcome my beloved friend and one of my favorite teachers, Sam Geppi Sadasiva. Namaste. He's going to lead things off.
Thank you. And Om Namah Shivaya to everyone. It's nice to see you, Kṣaṇāti, Freedom, Dr. Pai, Eve, and Visti. And we'll get us started here. I'm going to drop this link in the comments for people, this is a link to the manual. I'm going to share my screen here as well. Oh, can I share my screen, Kṣaṇāti? Give me permission there. Can you maybe make me a co-host or something? Is it possible? Oh, okay, there we go. All right, so you can see my screen? Good. So so this is to the manual here, and you do see I have a couple links. If people want to get a full course that I taught on this, you can click that here, and you'll see that all of my esteemed colleagues here will have links to some, to some classes and stuff. And I encourage students that are here watching this. It's great to watch this, these presentations that we do, but we put a lot of time and effort into professional courses and whatnot as well, where people can go deep. So I invite the students that are, that are watching this to also, dive deep into this wellspring of knowledge. This is some of the most beautiful and amazing stuff you'll ever study. So a formal study of these subjects is also encouraged. But for today, so like if you click here, it says full course here, you could, click that and you would have a link to, get a full course. But what we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to be talking about the Vimshotri Dasha activation in the harmonic charts. Go over this sort of briefly, but deeply. I have some case studies of some modern things that have happened. The celebrity Joe Rogan has been in the news lately. I'm going to show his D10 and the karma's activating in his D10. Also, there's a congresswoman in US named Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I pulled her chart up. These are actually really quite random. I did it yesterday. I just grabbed a couple charts. These case studies really work on pretty much anything. I use these two because we have some good birth times and they're people that we know of, but I could really have used anyone. And they're, if you have a good birth time and you have dates. So I'm going to be showing some techniques that I've been using for, decades to really give accurate insight into the charts. But first, just to go over the Vimshotri Dasha is one of the most well-known, if not the most well-known dasha. Most people, when they say my dasha is, etc., they're talking about Vimshotri because that's the one that Parashara says is appropriate for anything and everything. So as it says here, karmas unfold in accordance to the dashas. That dasha sequence, they are the life lessons, but within those lessons there are many influences that shape events and eventually show the specifics of the event that's happening. And there are many dasha systems in Vedic astrology that allow us to foresee the karmic events as they unfold here on earth. But the most prominent is Vimshotri Dasha. It's a nakshatra based system that uses a 120-year cycle where each planet rules a certain number of years, which is also broken down into sub-periods, also called bhuktis. The sub-periods are in the same order and divided relative to the dasha length below. For example, Ketu Dasha starts with Ketu, then moves to Ketu Venus, Ketu Sun. Everything is apportioned that way. So the planetary dashas in the Vimshotri Dasha scheme unfold in this order. And again, it's Ketu 7, Venus 20, Sun 6, Moon 10, Mars 7 years, Rahu 18 years, Jupiter 16, Saturn 19, and Mercury 17 years. So the first dasha length is calculated, if you're looking at a natal chart or really any chart, the first dasha length is calculated by the percentage the moon has moved into the birth nakshatra. Then the rest of the sequence would proceed from there. So for example, if the moon was at 640 Aries, that would be exactly 1/2 through the nakshatra of Ashwini. Since Ashwini is a 7-year dasha, you would then just cut that 7 years in half, and that first dasha length would be 3.5 years of the Ketu Dasha, then the rest of the dashas would unfold from there. So it's pretty easy to see how this works. And by the way, let's be clear that in Vedic astrology, the zodiac is sidereal. Every Vedic astrology and astronomy text says Aries and Ashwini at the zodiac. It doesn't say Ashwini begins a nakshatra circle and then the Rashis begin on the vernal equinox or anything like that. They could have said that there. There was the opportunity in all the texts to say it, and they didn't say it because they knew that Aries and Ashwini are pinned together. So this is why I say when the moon is at 640 Aries, it's halfway through Ashwini Nakshatra. So when we look at the ripening of karmas in the dashas, there's some very simple yet precise rules for the dasha planets activating karmas. Now, this is a formula that I've been using. Of course, all the teachers here work in different ways, but when you study with a teacher, you see their methods, and you'll see my methods. And I've been doing these for at least a decade or more, getting them more refined. But really, these rules really revolve around one key concept that I think is one of the most overlooked in Vedic astrology, and that's the rulerships. Everything we do, or at least everything I do in my system as it relates to precise Vedic astrology work, is going to revolve first around what the planets rule and their functional nature, not necessarily where they are. Like, many people jump right to, oh, Saturn is in the 3rd house, and they go right there, rather than Saturn is the ruler of ... right? So the rulerships really nail every chart as being specific. Once we have the ascendant, then all the signs become houses and the planets become rulers, and they have a functional nature, not just a natural status. So Jupiter is not just a great benefic. For a Taurus, it's the 8th and 11th lord, which is perhaps the most cruel planets based on its functional nature. So this is really the key to, in my view, pretty much everything, at least the way I work. And I think it's one of the most overlooked things. It's sort of put in the bucket with a lot of other things. Well, there's aspects, there's this, there's that, and oh yeah, the functional nature. No, that's like foundational. Once you have the ascendant, all the planets have a functional nature. So keep that in mind as we move forward, because that also nails all the yogas, the Raja yogas, the planets as rulers and whatnot. So again, I've been using this formula and fine-tuning it for more than a decade, making very accurate predictions as a result. And so I'm just going to tick through these rules, and then I'm going to show you this stuff in the case studies. So in the dasha cycles, the karmas are produced based on the planet as a karaka, which is its natural status, like Jupiter as teachers and children. The house ruler, again, like I just said, Jupiter for Taurus is the 8th and 11th lord. Jupiter for Leo is the 5th and the 8th lord. The dispositor, or the ruler of a planet in its sign, in the harmonic charts as well. The dispositor of a planet in its nakshatra, which is only applicable to Rashi chart. I don't think that nakshatras in harmonic charts, I don't use that. It doesn't seem scientifically sound. Some people do. I certainly don't. The only astronomical chart is the Rashi chart, and the planets activate the nakshatras. So again, if we're talking about Jupiter, that would be planets in Punarvasu, Vishaka, and Purvabhadra are also activated in a Jupiter Mahadasha or Subdasha. Okay, it's very technical. So Jupiter would rule Pisces and Sagittarius, and that's in all the Vargas. It also rules those 3 nakshatras. So whether you're in the Mahadasha, Subdasha, or whatever level you're analyzing, when you hit Jupiter, you first look at what it rules. Then you look at where it goes to see how it's activating or how it's expressing itself. So there's no hierarchy to that list. Look for a confluence of factors to see what the most prevalent issues will be. Pay close attention to when the Dasha Bhukti cycles line up, and the Bhukti planet is ruled by the Mahadasha planet. For example, a Mercury-Jupiter cycle with Jupiter in Mercury's sign, let's say Gemini, Virgo, or Nakshatra, Aslesha, Jyeshta, Revati, will be very active for showing major changes relative to what is indicated. So again, if you're in, like it says, Mercury-Jupiter, and Jupiter's in Mercury's sign, then the Mahadasha planet is ruling the Subdasha planet, and karmas get very active then. Then you'll see like the full effects. And that goes down to the tertiary level as well. And also perhaps in reverse, but it's mainly when the Mahadasha is ruling the Subdasha planet. Look for these factors in Rashi and harmonic charts. Look for planets that are both karakas and house rulers to impact with more force. For example, Jupiter is both the karaka of children and the 5th house ruler for Leo. So Jupiter dasha for Leo or Scorpio, where it's both the 5th lord and the karaka, is going to really activate that principle. Look for 2 or more of these factors. So for example, both the karaka and the house ruler to be active in Mahadasha and Subdasha. For example, the 5th lord and Jupiter really going to activate children or creativity. And again, all these factors you would also look at in the harmonic charts. Planets activate the Raja yogas they participate in, as well as those influences. The nodes only rule nakshatras, at least in the way that I'm working here, but also give their results per their yuti or their conjunction with the Bhava Lord. This is right out of Brihat Parashara Horasastra. That's the main way that the nodes give their karmas. If there's no yuti, then the ruler becomes important. And this is especially important in Vargas as there are no nakshatras. So again, I know that, especially according to Jaimini astrology, Ketu rules Scorpio, Rahu rules Aquarius. I don't really use that in this system, in the Rashi chart. And of course, but they do rule the nakshatras. So again, this becomes very significant in the dashas of the nodes. When people have planets in the nodes, in the Rashi chart, they become very prominent then. This is when you really see the results when someone's in a Rahu Dasha, Ketu Dasha, because they don't rule Rashis, they only rule nodes. You really see that force jump out. And if they don't, then you look at, and they're not joined planets, then you just look at the ruler. For example, I had my Ketu Dasha years ago. It doesn't rule anything. It's not joined anything, but its ruler, Jupiter, is in Pisces in my 10th house. So the Ketu Dasha just exploded with me teaching and whatnot. So that's how you would see that principle. So in harmonic charts specifically, which we'll be looking at, evaluate the Karaka in the Varga chart. Again, this is very important. Venus Dasha in the D9, Sun or Saturn in the D10. So again, if someone is in the Venus Dasha, you want to look at the D9 a lot because Venus is the Karaka of that harmonic chart. Pretty easy to see, right? Saturn Dasha, look in the D10 because Saturn is the Karaka of the D10. So look and see what it's doing during that Dasha cycle, or of course, the sub Dasha, or whichever level you're evaluating. Notice the chart ruler in the Varga. For example, in the Sun Dasha, a Varga that has the Leo ascendant. So again, this is going to really activate that Varga, right? Again, even if it's not the Karaka or what have you, always use the Dasha cycle and look and see which Vargas does it rule, particularly if it's one of the prominent ones like the D9 or D10, which show our relationships and our work. Notice important house and house rulers in the Varga. For example, the 7th ruler in the D9, the 10th ruler in the D10. We're going to see this in these case studies. Again, pay really close attention. So if the D10 is ruled by Scorpio, right, then, or if it's a Scorpio ascendant, then the Sun becomes the 10th lord in the D10, right? Venus becomes the 7th lord in the D7. So you look at both the Karaka and the house ruler in the Varga. They become very important. And the planets also retain their nature as rulers and Karakas in the Vargas. So Jupiter is still Jupiter. It still brings teaching, inspiration, purpose. So again, you want to look at the planets that are ruling those important houses or ruling the rulers. So for example, the planet that rules Venus in the D9, if Venus is in Pisces, then Jupiter in the D9 is going to be very powerful because it's ruling the Karaka in the Varga, for example. So, and there's a few overlooked factors that also must be considered, as it says here, the functional nature of each planet. Again, none of these rules go away. As a ruler, every planet is, you have to look at the planet as a ruler, as a functional benefic or malefic. You look at yogas, especially classical Raja yogas, which are angle and trine lords intermixing. Dignities of planets always there. And again, this is in Shadbala, it's in Vimshotri, it's in all of that, the dignities of the planets in the harmonic charts aspects. Some don't consider that in Vargas, but I do, and it's based on this research. I think there's a sound reason to use aspects in the Vargas. Also, exchanges are very important, what's called parivartana yogas. So if we look at some of these principles here, we can look at Joe Rogan here. He's recently had a lot of stuff happen. You can see, I just looked at this chart, I pulled it up, and his contract with Spotify, if you don't know, he's a well-known podcaster. He might be one of the most famous people in the world now. And in the middle of 2020, he signed a huge contract with Spotify that paid him like $100 million right when Saturn Jupiter started. He's just recently had a lot of controversy where Neil Young pulled his music off Spotify. That was in Saturn, Jupiter, Venus. We're just going to be looking at the D10. And he's about to go into Saturn, Jupiter, Sun here in a few weeks, actually. And I said destruction ahead. So I have a brief synopsis here at the bottom that says, and so we're just looking at the D10. Now, Saturn is the ruler of the Karaka. The ruler and the Karaka of the career. So it's the ruler of the D10. So again, Saturn Dasha is going to be big in his D10. And if you go back and look in his chart, when his Saturn Dasha started, that's really when his career really took off and he's become the most famous. There's going to be a huge focus on that. It's the ruler of the D10, right? Jupiter is in the 10th and also the indicator of an inspiring leader. So again, we're looking at Saturn, Jupiter. Jupiter actually goes into the house in the Varga. So again, this is another thing to really look at. The D10, the 10th lord in the Varga is going to be important. What's there? Well, the subdasha planet is there, right? It's also there with the moon. Now, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus fully activates this 10th house because Venus is the 10th lord in the D10. So it's also, again, so we not only have the Karaka activated in the Varga, not only is Saturn active, but at this tertiary level of Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, like right now, Venus, the 10th lord, is also really active. And Venus is ruling this Jupiter moon in the 10th house. And if we look in the D10, Venus is in the 2nd. Again, we can just analyze his career based on this chart as well. So I'm getting through this really quick so I can show you these rules and show you how the karmas ripen. But again, you can see his work in broadcasting, in communication and whatnot, shown by the 10th lord in the 2nd, shown by Jupiter, which is the 3rd lord, which also has to do with media and speech. Also in the 10th house, his relationship with the public, which is the moon in the 10th house with Jupiter. So all of this stuff, also the ups and downs, he's had a lot of different work. So right now, this Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, if we go to the 3rd level, is really activating his work in a fully developed way. And so we're seeing this big focus. He's probably more famous now than he's ever been. And this is one of the biggest things with the D10 is also fame and impact. And we see this with Saturn, Jupiter, Venus now, perhaps more than in any other time. And I think there might be some destruction ahead because this sun is the 8th lord, Saturn, Jupiter, sun is coming next, and the sun rules the 8th house. And I think there's going to be a big shift ahead where maybe he'll get dropped or he'll take a sabbatical or break or something like that. So I wanted to just show this case study as well. And again, there's another case study here. I want to be mindful of the time though. It goes quick. That was close to 20 minutes. Should I do this last one really quick, Kṣaṇāti?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. So this is an interesting one. This is a congresswoman who was just elected. And again, this one is very interesting because this is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a U.S. congressperson, very sudden victory. She's very progressive and young from New York. And her victory in 2018 was very sudden because she defeated a well-known New York congressperson who was on all these committees. He'd been around forever, and she came out of nowhere and won. Now, she was actually elected. The actual election to Congress was November 6th of 2018. But you could see that in July of 2018 is actually when the Ketu sun happened. But she actually won the primary, which was really the most important victory during Ketu Venus. That's when she defeated the incumbent in a Democratic primary and came out of nowhere and won. So you can see Ketu sun, and again, this is her D10. The ascendant is Aquarius. And again, you can just read the chart. This is a very inspiring young congressperson. This is Aquarius, wanting to do good for the world. Again, the sun is what makes someone the king, or in her case, the queen. So in Ketu sun, she actually became elected, but in Ketu Venus, this is when she was campaigning, going door to door. She's this inspiring, young, attractive woman, very Venus-like, very friendly. And so again, for an Aquarius person, Venus is the 4th and the 9th lord. She literally went around knocking on doors, winning the old-fashioned way. So in her Ketu Venus, what she was living at that time was that kind of life. She hadn't really won yet. And then right after the primary, which was in June, that's when she went into Ketu sun. And it was really all but concluded because it was a very Democratic district. Once she won the primary, they knew she was going to be elected. But all of that Ketu Venus, before she was even actually elected, you could see Venus is in the 9th house. And as an Aquarius person, it shows where she's a very inspiring leader. And of course, Ketu is in Leo in the D1. It's in Magha. You could go back and see all of this. So in Ketu sun, she became elected and actually won the election. So in Ketu sun, the Karaka gets activated and the ruler of both Mercury, which is the 5th lord, and Ketu, the Mahadasha lord, are also activated. So in Ketu sun, I'm sorry, in the D10, it also activates Mercury, the fifth lord, and also Ketu, the Mahadasha lord. So again, this is another case study. Again, these case studies would require a lot. There's so much depth and nuance here where you could even just analyze people's career. Like we could just look at Rogan's career, just looking at this D10. Capricorn with Saturn in the fifth, very auspicious, very creative. All these planets in the 10th house. He's always been a leader on TV and inspiring people, etc. But we have limited time and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. But this is a way where you can approach, just to wrap it up, when you're looking at dasha cycle and you look down at the second and third level, if it's a long cycle, you want to just look in those Vargas. And if you see, does Saturn rule any of the harmonic charts? Yes. Okay. It's the ruler of that D10. That's going to be really important. Well, how well is it disposed? Well, it's forming this massive Raja Yoga in the fifth house. He's got these two planets in the 10th house. And then you look and see when those things line up. Saturn, Jupiter, boom, at the pinnacle of his power. And then some complexity comes in. So I hope this was helpful for people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was a fantastic elaboration on Vimshotri Dasha, specifically in relation with activation through Vargas. Really, really awesome research there. I wanted to give the rest of a panel an opportunity to respond if perhaps there's any comments or insights or questions for Sam. Okay, we're moving along then. Thank you again, Sam. So great to receive your research in that area.
Indeed, thank you.
So next I'm going to be discussing something that I would like to share. So let me just share my screen with all of you. Thank you for your time and attention. It's deeply appreciated. So these are all my lovely friends who are here today with their smiling faces. I hope I got some good pictures. So basically, one of the things that I'm going to be focusing on today, let me just fix my speaker view here. There we go. Perfect. Excellent. I don't know, why is it showing Sam? I don't know why it's doing that. I was trying to fix this here. There we go. That should do it.
I see your screen fine.
Okay, great. And me?
I see all of us and your screen.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that'll work.
I think that's what people saw with
looks
me.
perfect.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to be discussing something that I describe as common misunderstandings and evolutionary nature of malefic dashas. And the real enthusiasm for this is practicing Jyotish for many years now. A lot of clients come to me with what I call Jyotish PTSD, which is basically they come to me traumatized from a previous session that was kind of doom oriented, where they had fear instilled in them. And then were told to pay these inordinate amounts for these pujas and so on and so forth. And so I just, over the years, I've come to understand there's a lot of fear in Jyotish. And part of what I want to do as an astrologer is take the stigma out of the fear-based astrology. You know, we're here to heal. We're here to help people understand. And so the intention behind what I'm doing today is to help us kind of destigmatize some of these common misunderstandings of typically malefic dashas and understand their true evolutionary nature. So the premise for this presentation is to move away from this fear. So one of the things is, even though the primary three krura or cruel grahas are Sun, Mars, and Shani, and then there are also mentions of tertiary to that of Moon, Rahu, Ketu, and Mercury as also having this cruel or malefic energy as well. But the first level of malefic planets are Sun, Mars, and Shani, are these top tier, as I call them, Krura grahas. But I've noticed in my research that people aren't nearly as afraid of their Sun Mahadasha or their Mars Mahadasha as they are of, for example, Rahu and Ketu. So why is that? There's a stigma going on here. So that's what I wanted to point out. So I'm going to focus on what I understand are the three most feared planets, the three most feared dashas in Vimshotri Dasha, which are Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, and dispel some of this stigma and understand their true evolutionary nature. So this is some of the things that I commonly hear about Saturn Dasha when a client comes to me wanting to know about their Saturn Dasha. 19 years of this? Am I going to get sick? Will everything I start just be totally concentrated with delays, failures, and obstacles? Is one of my family members going to die? Am I going to be depressed for the next 19 years? I've heard all of these things. So Saturn is a traditional top tier Krura graha. I mean, most astrologers will tell you that Saturn can act cruel. But there's a lot of misunderstandings here. You know, even though this planet has potential for malefic effects, all of the planets are divine. So can we understand their divine nature? Discuss, okay, well, even if an effect is malefic, why is it malefic? I want to bring respect to Saturn, but not as much fear. So it is commonly misunderstood about Saturn that we don't obtain our desired result. If we want something and we're in Saturn Dasha, it's not going to happen. We want to get married, it's not going to happen. This is a misunderstanding. This is a falsehood. One of the Sanskrit names of Saturn is Naisargika, which means that which moves slowly. And so Shani delays, but doesn't necessarily deny, and sometimes guarantees the aim of like activated if we do the proper approach, if we really honor Saturn properly during its dasha, instead of removing that thing which we want with hard-earned effort and discipline, it can actually help us obtain it. So it goes to the old adage, Saturn is a planet that delays, but it doesn't deny. Saturn denying is kind of a misunderstanding about Saturn Dasha. It is also commonly misunderstood about Saturn that in its Dasha, you're going to get sick or our loved ones are going to die. There's a lot of fear around sickness and death when it comes to Saturn. And yes, Saturn can activate certain death and disease, but it's not automatic. You know, it usually Saturn represents this discipline. So if we do not have the proper discipline, especially with our health, that needs to be applied in our lives, representing a physical, mental, and spiritual sadhana that we need to have for our longevity, then yeah, Saturn can cause some malefic effects on our health or even potentially our longevity. But if we apply the necessary discipline through our sadhana, through dinacharya, which relates to Ayurveda, then that's not necessarily the case. Let's remove the fear and think about, instead of me saying, I'm cursed to be diseased during this Saturn Dasha, what can I do in terms of a disciplined dinacharya in my daily life to actually ensure my longevity? Because, you know, Saturn ensures longevity if the proper discipline is applied. One of my strongest and favorite teachers who I studied with many years is Dr. Vasant Lad. And even though he primarily focuses on Ayurveda, his guru was an incredible Jyotisha. And he looks at the charts of the clients before he does their Ayurveda. So he was looking at an 8th house Saturn, and he says, this will guarantee you a long life, but a long life with arthritis. And that's just a little joke that Dr. Loudwood used to say. So now to understand the evolutionary nature, to help destigmatize some of this energy, no spiritual change or growth manifests without Saturn. If you want to grow, if you want to change, Saturn's the planet you want to work with. So Shani is absolutely essential to the manifestation of our goals, aims, and areas of life, which it's activating. If we receive something without working for it, do we properly appreciate it? No. The harder we work for something and the longer we take to get it helps us appreciate the value of working for what we achieved. You know, this is something that is common sense, but we can forget that if we want all these blessings but not working for them, and do we truly deserve them? I mean, maybe if we did some past life karmic beautiful thing, but if we want to look at it in a more logical way, you get what you deserve, and you have to work for something if you want it. And that's what Saturn can help us teach us this. So Saturn actually allows us to appreciate the rewards of our efforts because we've worked so hard for them. Saturn helps guarantee the area of activation that we are truly deserving based on our discipline and steadfastness. Once we grow, change, and develop the necessary maturity and discipline in our lives, Saturn can become truly remarkable. Saturn can be your best friend. I really believe you want to hold some light to Saturn instead of so much fear. And then Saturn is also called Mahakala, Maha great Kala time. So the great time and the Lord and controller of time. So our perception of time in terms of the general human condition is connected to our desires and our will. So this means when we wish to achieve our goals and manifest our vision, which for most people is in the immediate future. We as humans go out in the universe perpetuating to assert our individual will on this universe by achieving our goals as it relates to our perception of time. I want, I just started working this job, but I need a promotion. I'm only making $30,000 a year. I need to make $100,000 a year. I'm having trouble in a relationship, but I want to get married. I want to have kids by the time I'm 27 years old. There's so many examples of how we try to assert our will on the universe. So Saturn, from an evolutionary perspective, pushes us to surrender our control of time, which is our will, our individual ego, to become patient and disciplined as we come to understand divine time, which I believe to be God's will. In this way, we can understand Saturn as the deliverance and activator of God's will, which can be parallel to our will and our perception of time. So in this way, Saturn Dasha helps us understand God's will for us. And, any spiritual person out there, we have to take our individual will out of it and pray and desire and want to be in alignment with God's will, which is also letting go of our perception of time, which relates to our desires. So that's just a little elaboration on Shani Dasha to help destigmatize the fear and discuss what's really going on during Saturn Mahadasha. Okay, how about Rahu Dasha? I mean, there's people joke, Rahu, you need a group to all get together, like a 12-step program for Rahu. And I mean, if there's any planet that I want to destigmatize actually more than any other, it's Rahu. I mean, that's my energy as a person, is to destigmatize Rahu. There is an highly evolved, beautiful aspect of Rahu, which we all should desire to get in touch with. These are some of the things I hear about Rahu Dasha. 18 years of this. Will I never find my passion? Am I going to be stuck in a rut forever? Am I going to get divorced? Will I obtain material security? Will I be deceived, abused, lied to, maybe manipulated? So some of the common misunderstandings of Rahu Dasha, it is commonly misunderstood that in the entirety of our Rahu Dasha, we're just going to be stuck in this Maya illusion, this rut, this dark tunnel with no light in it. That we will constantly be struggling to understand who we are, and we're just lost and wandering aimlessly. It's certainly true that from a karmic perspective, Rahu Dasha activates like this dharma versus adharmic paradigm, I call it. And we can only understand our true nature and dharma by being incorrect about it and walking the right path. I mean, that's the best way. So it is actually through the illusion that we find the light. How do we know something is false unless we experience it? So in this way, Rahu is actually the greatest gift to our Dharma. And why Jupiter Dasha, comes after Rahu Dasha, what is that energy? You know what I mean? It's a Dharma and then Dharma. So it is also commonly misunderstood that the good things we have in life, as we get into Rahu Dasha, that they're automatically going to become destroyed and taken away from us. They're like, people come to me, they just started their Rahu Dasha, but I'm married. Am I going to get divorced? I have this job. Am I going to get fired? And personally, I think that's more likely during Ketu. This is totally a falsehood, because if we are living in our Dharma, despite the challenges of a dharma, or we'll call them temptations to a dharma, standing outside of yourself, we will not lose the good things in our life. If they're dharmic, they're not going to leave. Doesn't matter what dasha it is. If it's dharmic, it's in alignment with you. For example, if our marriage is dharmic and we are living a dharmic life, Rahu will sustain the marriage and probably making it exciting. You're going to travel the world with your partner. You're going to do all these fun and exciting things. It's not something to be so afraid of, unless you're standing outside of your dharma and committing, these things which go against your true self, or we might call them in Sanskrit prajna parad, which means crimes against your own inner wisdom, which are inherently adharmic. So, but here's the thing: if the marriage is adharmic in its nature, the person is taking advantage of you, or it's an unhealthy, unevolutionary relationship, then yeah, it's possible that Rahu will cause a separation. But that's inherently a blessing, because even though a relationship is convenient and we never want them to end, if it's adharmic, why would you want it in your life in the long run anyway? I mean, that's a question you have to ask yourself. So just to understand a little of the evolutionary nature of Rahu Dasha, the evolutionary nature of Rahu Dasha is to reveal to us exactly who we are and why we're here. I truly believe that. By the time you get to Jupiter, you should already have some understanding of that. Unfortunately, the most certain and powerful way to do that is for us to be walking outside of swasta, which means to stand in your own true self, for some time, in order to realize that it is not what we truly need or want in our lives. In ancient texts, Rahu has been described as the controller of the directions. This concept is often forgotten, but understanding that Rahu Dasha is to reveal to us our true path in the most hard knock of ways, which is why Rahu in its most evolved form is extremely austere and spiritual. Because when you have to go through a dharma, when you have to go through pain and suffering to figure out what your dharma is, you're going to be serious about it, and you're not going to give it up for anything else. You're going to stand with sincerity and austerity and dedication to that dharma, because you know what it's like to be disconnected from your true self. Illusion can also be a tricky thing, because unevolved and immature Rahu manifests as a perception that our desires are what we need, and that once we get them, our soul can finally experience some reprieve. As soon as I get what I want, I'm going to be fine. As soon as I have enough money, as soon as I'm famous enough, as soon as I reach this weight, as soon as I'm in relationship with this person that I desire, everything's going to be fine. That's the nature of illusion. The head without any body is always craving satiation through external means, which that's illusory in itself, because the soul's true contentedness comes from within. This is called serenity, a state in acceptance and peace with what is. Happiness is not always having anything you want. Serenity, inner peace, comes from acceptance of what is. Rahu can often represent the attainment of power, wealth, and fame, but without humility and austerity, there is no contentedness with worldly gains. How often do we hear of the person who has $1 million and then they get addicted to heroin, or they kill themselves, or all these tragic things that, wealth does not lead to happiness. It can actually make it much more challenging, because the more you have, maybe on an energetic level, the more it takes for you to experience contentedness. That's illusion. The true evolutionary nature of Rahu Dasha reveals to us that our desires, once satisfied, may not be what we thought they were. pushing us to this higher evolutionary nature of Rahu, which is the full realization of our mystical, spiritual, and occult potential, which really comes down to being present in this moment and grateful for what you have instead of desiring more. The last dasha I want to begin to dispel some stigma of is Ketu dasha. Things I hear about Ketu dasha: 7 years of this. Am I going to die? Am I going to lose everything? Will I become enlightened? I think I'm going to become enlightened. Is everyone I love going to die? Will I constantly be facing obstacles? So Ketu is described as the significator for moksha, which, you know, in English, first of all, English translation of Sanskrit words, it's always, you know, far off. The Sanskrit language is inherently has these different ways of interpreting the prefixes and the suffix and the way that the word is structured. And in the English language, it's tit for tat. This means this means that. So when you're trying to define these spiritual concepts with an English word, it's inherently lost in translation. And I think that's where some of the common misunderstanding of Ketu dasha comes in. So, you know, the common concept of, okay, Ketu dasha and I'm going to become enlightened, it's relatable to our misunderstanding of enlightenment in general as a human condition. We often confuse enlightenment for these bells and whistles experience of total euphoria, bliss, and happiness, when in actuality, moksha is painful. Now, we're going to pick that apart. You know, the word moksha means, you know, my favorite translation of moksha, if we're going to use an English word, is release, letting go. So Ketu helps us release us from the bondage of our attachments, which is not a euphoric process. If you want something, if you're attached to something, having that taken away from you, it sucks. It's painful, but it's the end result of that reducing of non-attachment that leads to the samadhi, that could potentially lead to the samadhi. But if you have attachments, enlightenment is very, very, very far away. And even being attached to the enlightenment itself is an attachment. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. But the idea here is that enlightenment is this euphoric experience when the end result of letting go of our attachments leads to maybe something we discussed earlier, which is serenity. It is also commonly misunderstood that during Ketu dasha, we will lose everything that we value and enjoy in our lives. It's not false that Ketu removes things, right? We talked about release, but Ketu is blessing us when it does that, right? So Ketu's primary concern is that our soul is on this path to moksha, that the lessons of our samskara, our previous incarnations, continue to be evolved and integrated as we prepare for our samadhi and mahasamadhi to end the cycle of reincarnation. If we remain non-attached to the blessings in our life through spiritual practice and they are not interfering with our soul's evolution, Ketu won't necessarily remove them. It's the attachment that Ketu will take away, not the thing that's in alignment with. If you have this kind of what I call devoted detachment to the things in your life that you love and you serve them as divine, I believe that Ketu will honor that, you know, so especially in a case of dual or changeable karmas. The last thing I wanted to discuss is the evolutionary nature of Ketu dasha. You know, Ketu is the giver and placer of obstacles. We hear that so much. You know, Ketu gives obstacles, Ganesh removes them. To understand the evolutionary nature of our Ketu dasha, what do these obstacles represent? On an unevolved basic human level, an obstacle is something that when it's presented in our lives, we must destroy, we must overcome, or we must ignore it. Out of sight, out of mind. That obstacle is something that I need to overcome. But what if that perceived obstacle, we then perceived it as an omen, a little wink or suggestion from the universe or from God? That is the evolution of our relationship with Ketu. Not everything is some coincidence that is to be ignored, overcome. Maybe the universe is trying to tell us something by the obstacles that we have in our lives. Ketu's primary concern is preparation for moksha. So what attachments, unhealthy patterns, or aspects of our lives do we have holding us back from our spiritual trajectory? These are the kinds of obstacles K2 places in our lives. Let's say a job that is out of alignment with our spiritual progress, a relationship that is codependent, an addiction to an unhealthy substance or pattern. K2 will bring obstacles which we experience as consequences and destruction, when in reality, the universe is telling us that it has a higher calling for us, a stronger alignment, a need for evolution, and a need to not repeat these ancient patterns, the samskara, which we have experienced in our previous lives. I always use an example. There's a lawyer. The universe has something higher in store for this lawyer, but he's working at a firm, 60 hours a week, and he has a higher spiritual practice path, calling. He's meant to be a guru. So, during K2 Dasha, he's on his way to work and the tire pops. Most people are like, okay, a tire pops, whatever, no big deal. Very few people are going to say, oh, that's an omen from the universe. Then the second day, a week later, he's driving to work during his K2 Dasha, and all of a sudden the transmission in the car fails, and he's on the highway in the left lane, and just in time he gets over to the right lane before he's in a car accident. It's a little weird, maybe someone who's spiritual will potentially see that as an omen, but your average person is going to say, oh, my car's messed up. You know what I mean? He was already thinking about leaving his job, but he likes the convenience of it. He then takes the company car because he got the company car. He's taking it to work another week later. Next thing you know, he wakes up in the hospital on IV with his arms and legs casted. While his arms and legs are casted into the hospital, he gets the teachings of Patanjali, he gets the Yoga Sutras, he gets the Bhagavad Gita. Maybe he gets, other powerful spiritual books, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to go to India. And in his first week in India, he runs into a robed elder man who says, you're my disciple. I've been looking for you my whole life. So I like using that example to talk about the evolutionary nature of K2. And this K2 is angelic more so than demonic. We must take our over-identification with our attachments outside of it to achieve the full evolution of K2 Dasha. We must see K2's effects as gifted omens instead of insufferable obstacles. So I hope I got through that in a good amount of time. I just wanted to dispel some of the fear and ignorance that I've seen and help heal some of this trauma. And now, hopefully, if you checked out this video, you have things to understand and look forward to about Saturn, Rahu, and K2 Dasha. Let's not bring so much fear into it, lovers of Jyotish. So thank you so much. Does anyone on the panel want to comment or share before we go to the next presentation? Sam? Oh, you're muted, Sam. There we go.
Just really quick, because I already did a presentation, but it's the same principle that I said also for people to remember, is that the functional nature of the planet is really important. Saturn for Taurus and Libra, like it's just Yoga Karka. We just saw a case study with Rogan. This is why I wanted to mention it. He's a Taurus ascendant in the Rashi. Saturn is his 9th and 10th lord. You look in the harmonic chart, it rules the D10. It's in the 5th house. It's a massive Raja Yoga in the D10. Tell him his Saturn Dasha hasn't been powerful, at least for what it's trying to do. It's both the Karaka of career. It rules the D10. It's forming a crazy Raja Yoga in that chart. And the whole Dasha has been very fulfilling for him. So the functional nature of the planet as well, just like Mars for, Cancer and Leo or whatever, is everything. It's like they don't get anywhere without the power of Mars, right? He's the man with the spear. So the functional nature also is a more elevated way to see how that evolutionary process is going to play out. It's harder for the evolutionary process to play out when it's a functional malefic like Mars for Gemini or Virgo. It's much harder for that higher dharmic quality to play out, because it doesn't rule those dharmic houses. But when the planets rule the dharma houses, when they rule either the 1st, 5th, or 9th houses, those planets themselves become dharma lords. So that's the nuance I would say, especially about the planets. Their functional nature is really everything. That's what I would add. But excellent presentation. I just wanted to add that point of clarity, because it also is what I said in my presentation as well. And we saw the case study.
Yeah, definitely. The functional nature is absolutely essential to see how challenging or easy it is to get those higher dharmic aspects. You know, my ruling planet, Saturn, and the Saturn Dasha has been incredible for me. It's been
Right.
challenging, but it's led to me understanding why I'm here. So I'm just
And
really.
Mars would be more challenging. I always also kind of carve the zodiac in half because for half the ascendants, Mars is that natural malefic that's a functional benefic. And for the other half, Saturn is that natural malefic that's the functional benefic. So it goes half of the signs, that the fire and the water signs, Mars is a Dharma planet. For the earth and the air signs, Saturn is a Dharma planet. It's pretty easy, but very powerful to remember.
Any other comments, beloveds? Okay, great. So next, I would like to present Dr. Arjun Pai, who's going to talk on Nadi Nakshatra Tribhagi Dasha system, which I'm very excited to hear his research. Always love having you in these events, Dr. Pai. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Kṣaṇāti. Today I'm going to talk about a dasha technique, which I learned from the late Professor A.V. Sundaramji. He's also mentioned about this technique, which is a Nadi Dasha progression technique. And he's mentioned it in his book as well, Insights in Nadi. And I learned from him this technique as well, personally. So there are many layers to this technique, but I will talk about the basic layer that I learned from him, and then I've innovated, and today I'll just stick with the first layer. There are multiple layers, but the concept of this Nadi Dasha system, which I have coined the name as Tribhagi. There is also another Tribhagi system. It is not based on that Tribhagi system. This is based on a Nadi concept. And what I loved about this concept is it is based on the principles of the trines or the trinity. So everything what we see when we are talking about this is a nakshatra based dasha system of Nadi. And we'll appreciate this technique because everything you see, we have the concept of Trinity, which is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. We also will see in Shiva Mahapuran, we talk about the three cities, the three flying cities were called as Tripura. And Shiva destroyed all the three cities together, and that's why he's called as Tripurantakari as well. Then we will see in the system that there are three doshas, which is Vata, Pitta, Kapha. There are three lokas or three worlds. There are Bhur, Bhuvaloka, and Sualoka. Okay. Then we have three states of a Rashi: Chara, Sthira, Dviswabhava, or Ubhaya Rashi. Like we have movable or cardinal, then we have fixed, and then we have mutable signs. We also see that Vishnu took 3 steps to assume all the 3 worlds. We also see there are 3 phases of our life: young age, middle age, and old age. Similarly, there are 3 gunas: Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. We have 3 deha types. There are 3 types of bodies, which we say Stula Deha, which is physical body, Sukshma Deha or Sukshma Sharira, which is subtle body, and Karana Deha, which is causal body. Likewise, we have 3 ganas as well: Manushya, Deva, and Rakshasa. And we have 3 kala. 3 kalas means we usually say we are a 3 kala jnani. Jnani means who has the knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. There's 3 divisions of time as well. So when we look at this dasha system based on Nadi, it is based on this concept of the tree. Whether you say, it is, we also see that there are 3 states of water, liquid, solid as ice, and gaseous state. So why I'm bringing this is number 3 is a very important concept. And that's why this concept that I'm going to explain to you is based on the concept of nakshatras being divided also into 3 parts. The first set of 9 nakshatras which start from your natal moon is called as Janma nakshatras. The next set of 9 nakshatras which follows that is called as Anujanma, which means what comes in the future. And the last set of 9 nakshatras which wraps the nakshatras back to the natal moon in your chart is called as Trijanma, which means it comes from the past. So this Nadi technique that I will share my screen now and I will explain to you is based on this division of time of past, present, and future. I hope I can. Okay. Is everybody able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Right. Now, this dasha of Nadi, we have in Vimshotri dasha system, we see that each planet is associated with 3 nakshatras. And this I have said in many of my courses as well. It is wrong to claim that the nakshatras are ruled by the planetary lords or the grahas. It's a disrespect to the nakshatra devatas. The Rig Vedic nakshatra devatas are the lords of the nakshatras. But when we come to Vimshotri dasha, which is 120 years, here we are seeing only in the dasha system, in the Vimshotri, these are the planetary lords which are associated with these nakshatras. Okay? Only in the dasha of Vimshotri, because when we change the dashas, what Parashar Rishi is given, the conditional nakshatra dashas, then the planetary lords are going to change. So don't fix these lords to the nakshatras. That's my thing. Now, we are talking specifically of the 120-year nakshatra Vimshotri dasha system here. So here in this system of Vimshotri, Ketu is associated with, Ashwini, Magha, Mula, and the Vimshotri dasha period of Ketu is 7 years. Now, this system is very easy to understand, and that's why I took this system to explain, because all you do is you divide the nakshatras or the Vimshotri dasha period into 3 parts. So if you have 7 years, each portion or each part would be 2 years and 4 months. Or we can say they are 28 months. Because, I'm talking about Ketu, 7 years would be divided into 2 years, 4 months each. And that means in terms of months, it would be 28 months. So this technique, what it says is, when you start with the Vimshotri dasha of a particular planet, observe where your natal moon is in your chart, in the Rashi chart. Then from the natal moon, look at the first nakshatra associated with that graha in the Vimshotri dasha. So let's say example, moon is in Bharani nakshatra in your natal chart. And let us say we are looking at the dasha of Vimshotri dasha of Mars. So we know Vimshotri dasha of Mars is 7 years. So the first Mars associated, nakshatra, which comes from your natal moon, from Bharani nakshatra, would be Mrigashirsha nakshatra. And Mrigashirsha nakshatra is given a time period of 2 years and 4 months, because the entire dasha of Mars is 7 years, and I'm dividing it into 3 parts and I'm assigning those periods to each of the nakshatras which are ruled by Mars. So from the moon, the first dasha of the Vimshotri dasha lord is what you want to assign. So Mrigashirsha in this example I'm giving you would be having 2 years, 4 months. Now the technique here is that would be 28 months. So if I have to divide further, Mrigashirsha nakshatra into 4 parts, because there are 4 padas for each nakshatra. So that means Mars would Mrigashirsha nakshatras, each pada would be active for 7 months. Okay, so the easy thumb rule to remember this dasha progression is, let us say you're looking at Venus. So when the first nakshatra of Venus from your natal moon is active, okay, the first pada of that nakshatra will be active for 20 months. If it is Saturn, it would be 19 months. The first pada, the second pada 19 months, the third pada 19 months, and the fourth pada 19 months. Understood? So what I would look is I would make that as the ascendant in the chart, and I will study the entire D1 chart, and I would also look at the Navamsha to see what are the results of that dasha and that period. Of course, the flavor of the nakshatra would be also to be studied. Okay, all the themes of that nakshatra will play out. Plus, I would make the lagna of the nakshatra. The same example I'm saying, moon in your natal chart is in Bharani nakshatra, and you are looking at the Vimshotri dasha of Mars. The first nakshatra that would be activated, for 2 years, 4 months would be Mrigashirsha. So the first 14 months, because the first 2 padas will fall in Taurus of Mrigashirsha. So I would make Taurus as the ascendant, and I would read the chart. The flavor that I get for that dasha period is connected to Mrigashirsha, and the flavors of Mrigashirsha will come in. Okay. Then the next thing is what I do is the first layer I'm talking about. You can further progress that dasha by dividing that period of that nakshatra further into 12 parts. And each rashi, I would keep progressing from that point. Okay. So if you're looking at Mars, this is what, it's not given in his book, but this is what he told me when he was teaching me. He said, the first dasha of Mrigashirsha will activate Taurus for 2 years, for 2 months. Then what he does is he will go to the next pada. And again, then he will progress it to Gemini, then he'll progress it to Cancer, and so on and so forth. Okay. So essentially what is happening is each pada, for the period of each pada, okay, there are 3 rashis that will be covered. For a period of each nakshatra pada, he will progress 3 rashis from the point where the nakshatra would be activated from. So for the same example from Bharani, so what he would do is for the first Mrigashirsha nakshatra first pada, so 2 months and 10 days, it would be Taurus. Then next 2 months, 10 days would go to Gemini. Then next 2 months, 10 days would be going into. So 7 months of each pada would be further, he would go and progress, and he will see how is the influence of these, what planets are sitting there, how they will influence during that period. Now, there is also what you have to see is how are the major planets and their transits can also influence this dasha. For example, Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, Ketu, and their transits over these nakshatras. So we are looking at, for example, the dasha of Mars, Vimshotri dasha of Mars. So whenever any of these planets, which is, major planets, or the dasha lord, the antar dasha lord, or pratyantar dasha lord, when they transit through Mars's nakshatras, then you can see some very important events that pan out in their lives. In Gochar, if you look at the Dashanath, the Antar Dasha Lord and the Pratyantar Dasha, if they are entering the nakshatras of the Vimshotri Lord, then also you would see some important events that can pan out in their life. So now to come to look at what is the past, present, and future. Now this is, I'm taking a snippet from his book. So what he says is, as an example, if in the first part, 1/3 part of that dasha, whatever events are happening will be reference to something coming from the past. I repeat, something coming from the past. So let's take this example. If you get a friend who comes into your life in the first 28 months of your Mars Vimshotri Dasha, that friend has a connection with your past. That event that has panned out has reference to the past. Then the next nakshatra after Margashirsha, my example, it would be Chitra Nakshatra. So any events and any person coming into your life would have something that will prevail to the present. The person has come to help you to pan out or to expand your domain and something to influence about your present. And should this friend or an event be encountered in the last part of the dasha, then this friend is somebody who they say has something to do, have met you for the sake of an event yet to come, which means in the future, this person or that event will have a bearing. Okay, so I'll quickly take an example because I know we are the paucity of time. So the example I'm taking is of Mahatma Gandhi. We're just looking at one event of his life. Look at the year 1942. See what has happened in the 8th of August, which is Quit India resolution was adopted. And, Gandhiji, the very next day after Congress working committee took this, he and the Congress working committee members were arrested and Gandhiji was imprisoned. So let us see if this event can be seen. Let me stop sharing my screen and let me bring up Jagannath Hora to show you this event. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Now this is the chart from Jagannath Hora of Mahatma Gandhiji. Okay. Now let's look at the time period that we said. Let's go to the dashas. Vimshotri Dasha started from the moon. And the time period that we're looking is 1942. If you see, he's just started the Jupiter Dasha. It is his 8th Mahadasha. Okay. And then we see he's going through the Antar Dasha of Saturn in the Mahadasha of Jupiter. Right? So when you start with the Jupiter's Mahadasha, the first period of Jupiter's Mahadasha, which would be associated from the natal moon, we look at the first nakshatra of Jupiter. So his natal moon is in Ashlesha Nakshatra. So when you progress from the natal moon, when you come forward, the first Jupiter's nakshatra in Vimshotri Dasha is Vishaka. So Vishaka Nakshatra would be active for 5 years, 4 months of the entire period of 16 years of the Dasha of Jupiter. All right. So now when we divide it, we will see that Vishaka Nakshatra first pada would be active for 16 months from the Dasha period starting. So when this event happened, he is running through Vishaka Nakshatra second pada, which is in August 1942. when the Quit India movement happened and he was imprisoned. That was the first greatest event that happened in India's independence from the British Raj. I mean, there are many such things that have happened in the past, but this was, the impact was very, very great. So 1942 was a great event. And if you see that this would be corresponding with his Lagna, because Vishaka Nakshatra, second Pada, would still be associated with this Lagna. Okay. And what you see in the Navamsha, we see what is active in the Navamsha. Vimshotri, Vishaka Nakshatra, second Pada will be going to Taurus Navamsha. So in his Taurus Navamsha, you can see Venus and Mars are posited. Venus is his 12th house lord, Mars is his 6th house lord, and Mars is also his Lagna lord. So you can see some event that is connected to the 12th house, 6th house, 1st house, Lagna, and going to the 7th house. Even though he was imprisoned, there was a change in status of the people. So let's go to quickly look at the transits. And I've already put it here. It's the 9th of August, 1942. So when you look at the transits, what is happening, if you see, Moon is in Punarvasu Nakshatra, Jupiter is in Punarvasu Nakshatra, that is again his Kṣaṇāti, the lord of his Dasha. So some very important event should happen because Venus is also sitting in Punarvasu Nakshatra, which is ruled by Jupiter, the Mahadasha lord. So if you see, Jupiter is in trine, okay, with the event and to the Nakshatra. So some very important event should happen in his life. So when you go back, you will see that the Nakshatra Lord and Vishaka is the split. There was a huge split that brought about. Vishaka is also about a Adhomukha Nakshatra. Something brought a downfall for the British Raj. There are many layers to this, but today I think because of the paucity of the time, I just wanted to share this technique, which is a very, very important technique where you can see what is happening from the past. And this event of Gandhi's life has a bearing to his past life. Very important event of his life because it's happening in the first part of his Mahadasha of Jupiter. So with that, I think, Kṣaṇāti, I know I've taken probably a little bit more than the time that was allocated, but I had to go through this because this is a fantastic dasha system based on Nadi. And I have seen this system work brilliantly when it wants to see what is the flavor coming in, what are the roots of the karmas that are unfolding for you, why it is unfolding for you, what is the flavor coming from the Navamsha. Okay, so this is just a introduction, and probably we can, like onion, you have many peels to it. You peel each layer and you can get many more layers from this. But this itself is a very brilliant way of looking at how things are going to, and what area of your life is that happening because of the past? Is it happening because of the present? Or has it that event or that person who has come into your life has a bearing in the future for you? So thank you very much for being patient. And I hope this has given some insights into the Nadi concepts, which the late Professor A.V. Sundaram had taught. So may his soul, Om Shanti to his soul, and may his soul rest in peace.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pai, for that incredible presentation of A.V. Sundaram's work. What I really wanted to say was, when you were deciding between topics, it was between this topic and another topic. And when I realized that this was A.V. Sundaram's research, the answer was very clear. A little bit of a backstory is I had always read his books and been fascinated by his work. And we eventually became friends on Facebook, and I was able to have these conversations with him. And when I started doing these summits years and years ago, I would ask him, please, A.V. Sundaramji, will you please come onto these summits, and will you join us? And he's like, I'm pretty much retired. I don't do these kind of live things anymore. But he told me, I want you to know that I think the work that you're doing is divine, and I think that you should continue to do that for the rest of your life. And that was pre-pandemic. And then I lost my younger brother. He passed away, and then the pandemic hit, and it was a very difficult time for me. And I took a break from this work. And then when things in my life improved, and I had done some healing, and I remembered what A.V. Sundaramji said. And so a lot of my inspiration with these summits this year, and we have more coming, and many more to come. It's with his grace and with his gift that has helped ignite that motivation inside of me. So thank you so much, Dr. Pai, for sharing his research. Any other comments on Dr. Pai's research and his presentation? Visti ji?
Dr. Pai, namaste. Did your guru ever speak of which Nadi he referred to for this dasha specific technique?
Okay, he didn't talk about this specific technique. Even in his book, he has not talked about it. But there are, what I've seen, similar techniques of these progressions taught in Chandrakala Nadi as well. Yeah. Similarly, what you start now, in this technique, he's saying, look it from the natal moon. I've also seen it works wonderfully when you look at from the Kṣaṇāti, which means from the Mahadasha Lord. Mm-hmm. It works brilliantly. Because there is also another technique in Chandrakala Nadi, which is called as Deva Keralam. The same technique is slightly different. The progression of the houses is taught there in the Chandrakala Nadi. How you go for the 12 houses and how they activate that is in Chandrakala Nadi. But this thing he has not told me, this from the natal moon, and this technique of dividing it is not told me from which Nadi that he is referring to.
Oh, in our tradition, we refer to the method of going through the houses as Chakra Dasha. That's what we call it. Chakra Dasha. We call it Chakra Dasha.
Right.
So I've read lots of Chandrakala Nadi. So I'm all ears and I get inspired. I've woken up and said, oh my goodness, somebody says a language from the texts, and so those references to Chandrakala Nadi, they refer a lot to the names of the taras, like if it is the Janma Dasha, Sampad Dasha, Vipad Dasha, and so on. It's a very specific reference. Anu Janma, I think, is called also when we refer to that, because it's the second row, it's called Karma Tara, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right.
It's called Karma Tara. And the Tri Janma is called Adana.
Adana, yeah, that's the 19th nakshatra where we start from.
Yes.
And the karma is the 10th nakshatra from your Janma nakshatra.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. What I was wondering in this technique is that normally when we speak of Adanatara, it refers to what has happened before our birth.
Yeah.
And the entire, according to Satyachara, the entire last 9 nakshatras are all Adana nakshatras.
Yes.
But this principle is asking us to see the beginning of the dasha, which is what would be the first 9, to be indicating something from the past.
That is exactly why I have put the snippet from his book, because that is how he has thought.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's why I didn't want to, question that. But that's a very good point that you're making, because I also have thought about that. But that's why I put that snippet from his book, because he has thought it that way. So when it comes from a guru, you don't question the guru, you just accept it the way it is. But if it works differently for you, you would obviously, try to improvise on that technique. Not that every technique that is given to you, there would be a few layers to it. But if he has mentioned it in his book, that means he has probably tested it over his.
He has definitely tested it more than me. I can trust.
It's same with
trying
me.
To understand the thought process behind it. That's all.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very.
And Kṣaṇāti, thank you for being so open with us. And I'm sure it was a difficult experience. I could not imagine losing my younger brother. I know it hurts and it's going to take a long time to heal. So, but thank you for sharing. It's and wishing you the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, any other comments on Dr. Pai's presentation?
I would like EG to comment because I know EG has tested this technique, maybe from her own perspective, but what is her insights? Is there something that you wanted to share, Eve? No, you're okay, right? I didn't want to put her on the spot, but that's some technique. She also tells me that she has been testing on her own and she has seen some good results from this technique. But thanks, Visti ji, for bringing that point. I think that's a very valid point that you brought up.
Thank you, Dr. Pai. That was so lovely. Even though A.V. Sundaramji was never officially in a summit, now he is in spirit. So that is really moving and touching to me. And thank you for bringing him here.
And one final thing I want to say with Professor A.V. Sundaramji, I might have spent only a few hours with him in my lifetime in this Janma, but it looks like I might have had a connection with him from many lifetimes because the doors of Nadi Jyotishi opened for me, and even Jyotish Nadi, as we say, astrological. That's phenomenal. That doesn't come from just spending just a few hours with that person. And that few hours, even those 10, 12 hours probably in my lifetime I spent with him, it seemed like he has taught me, generations of knowledge that you can't probably fathom. So sometimes these people come like teachers in your life, but they can just open up and give you a spark for you. And he's one such teacher, I have to say. He's has a very friendly way, but at the same time, he can be very strict with you when it comes to a certain concepts. He will say, I will not teach you this system. No, you're not meant for this. Or he will just say, I'm going to teach only to you this technique. This is meant only for you. So he had those things because he knew who deserves to get this knowledge and who doesn't deserve to get this knowledge. So these techniques that I'm sharing is already been published and in the public domain. So that's why, probably I get the permission to share that knowledge with all of you. So, but thank you very much for this patient hearing, and apologies for taking too long with this, my presentation.
No worries, Dr. Pai. I'm so happy to have you here. So next, I would like to welcome for his first time here in our summit, someone I'm very, very excited and grateful to have here, Freedom Cole, who's going to be doing a presentation on Naisargika Dasha as a foundation of prediction. Welcome, Freedom.
And can I share my screen?
Yes, one moment.
Okay.
And now you may.
And so I have this presentation here, and I edited this presentation up from a presentation that I present to mental health practitioners. So there's a lot more information in this than I'm going to go over, but I figured I'd use the slides, that way people can pause their YouTube in the future and they can read a little bit more to see how I've been utilizing this in the mental health world. I did 6 years of clinical psychology training. Haven't got the PhD yet, but that's, this was really, I dug deep from that material. I'm a student of Pundit Sanjay Rath, and everything I know about Dasha, I've learned from him, and I'm doing my best to understand. So any mistake is mine, and praises to the guru. So I'm going to be talking about Naisargika Dasha, and I'm a big fan of this particular timing. But before I really talk about this timing, I want to kind of like why this one versus that one. There's so many Dasha, and when we open up programs like Jagannath Hora and such, we look and there's so many, and a beginner, there's just overwhelm. And on a certain level, if you're a beginner, it's good just to put blinders on and learn Vimshotri first. But then once we've learned Vimshotri and we're starting to say, hey, let me integrate some of these other timing techniques. we divide these timing techniques into graha periods and rashi periods. So we have a Mars-Venus time period or an Aries-Sagittarius time period. And then we divide the dasha up into, are they starting from houses? Are they starting from a nakshatra, and which nakshatra? Are they starting from a placement of a planet or from a special lagna? And we begin to understand so much about the timing technique based upon where it's starting from. Like if we, there's a dasha that starts from the 9th house that we begin to understand spiritual experiences from, and it starts from the 9th house. So hence it shows when we use the Sri Lagna, we're looking for finances. Then we have the division of dasha into Phalita and Ayur dasha, ones that are used for predictive results in the world and ones that are used for longevity. And so this is really the core of what all these different timing periods fall into. And when we move into the Naisargika, the Naisargika means natural. It has this, it's the same for everybody. And so when we look at the Naisargika dasha, we are looking at timings that everybody when they're 1 year old will be in it. Everybody when they're 5 will be in it. Everybody when they're 22 will be in it. So they're the same for everybody on a certain level. We have planetary maturity. So Jupiter matures at 16 for everybody, Sun at 21 for everybody. When we look at the Naisargika graha dasha, everybody is in the same planetary period at the same time, but the condition and strength of that planet will change. So that condition and strength of that planet will determine how that time period comes, how that time period is experienced. We also, and so I'm going to be talking about the Naisargika graha dasha today. We also have a Naisargika progression of houses, which chakra dasha, which you just heard Visti mentioning, is what Dr. Arjun Pai taught, is what we call in the Pandit Sanjay Rath's tradition, Sudarshana chakra. It's the same houses unfolding in the same years for everybody, but there's a certain difference of what's in those houses. Then we have Naisargika Bhava dasha. So this is just, so where is what I'm about to talk about fitting in here? It fits into this natural timing and using the grahas. Where does this come from? This timing technique? We see that Brihat Jataka and Brihat Jataka, and it says Brihat Jataka and Brihat Jataka. It's Brihat Jataka and Saravali. They only use Naisargika dasha and Mula dasha. They don't use Vimshotri at all. So a lot of times when you think about Varaha Mihira, you think, wow, one of the greatest astrologers as well. He never used Vimshotri. He was very heavily utilized Naisargika. So we can see this is a primary dasha technique. We can see that it's taught in Yavana Jataka, Brihat Jataka, Horasara, and this should be, I think, Saravali right here. So little typos there. But just sourcing where this is coming from. Brihat Prasha Horashastra mentions this timing, but it's only using it as an ayur as an ayur daya, as for timing longevity. And as I said, this is used for this presentation. I just edited it from when I talk to mental health practitioners. And when we look in the Vedic paradigm, our first division is we divide life into 3 parts. And so there's a 3-part division of early life, midlife, old age. And these time periods are connected to Vata, are connected to Kapha, Pitta, and Vata, and all the significations that go with that. This is, when I talk about this, it's normally a 3-hour lecture. It's 20 minutes today, so I won't go deep into that. Then, so from the 3 divisions, we have a 4 division. of what we should be doing in these different time periods of life. Then we have a 5 division about the maturity and how we are what level of development we've achieved and how they relate to the different elements of life. So we have a 3, 4, 5, and then we go over to this 7 division, which is based on the 7 physical planets. And Pandit Sanjay Roth goes deeply into the physical planets. This is natural. So we're not using Rahu and Ketu here because they have a unnatural signification associated with them. So they give us these 7 stages of maturity. It shows both biological and emotional development. And a verse from the Mahabharata, it says, time controls the thinking of living beings and gives the person their results in sustenance and purpose. So time controls. And if we look, a 1-year-old baby, what it's thinking about, what it wants, is very much determined by the fact that it's an infant. From 1 to 3 years of life, there's what we think about, there's what we want. From 3 to 12, there's the focus. You won't have certain desires at that time of life because it's just not the time of life to have certain desires. So these time periods are showing what is up for us in this time period of life. And this is the same for everybody, but not everybody has the same Mercury. Not everybody has the same Venus. So this is going to alter what is up for you in these time periods and how the goals of this time period, what you should be developing, what we work on in this time period will show how it will show up in this individual's life. In the research literature, if we look at Freud's anal, oral, etc. stages, we can see that this lines up a little bit with Naisargika, because if it's a natural phase, natural, meaning that natural and the same for everybody, a scientist should be able to observe it. So Freud kind of had his theory, but there's a guy named Erik Erikson, and him and his wife did some extensive research with child development. And he was a student of Freud, and he took Freud's work and he said, well, you know, it's a nice theory, but let me in a laboratory really look at what is developing. And he developed this psychosocial developmental model. And he showed what challenges are coming up for a person, and if they develop in healthily through this time period, what will come up. So this first phase, if that moon time period is successful, the person will have hope. And hope is very deep in that the ability to believe, the ability to have faith, the ability to know that things will be okay. And we can see in our moon time period and what the condition of the moon is, whether this develops or not. So I teach this to mental health professionals to show that what was discovered by Erik Erikson has actually been discovered millennia before. And here I give a exact correlation where I line up the Naisargika and Erik Erikson's psychosocial development. And we can see for the moon, Naisargika lines up perfectly. For Mars, lines up perfectly. And Erik Erikson found that the will is what is developing during this time period. And what is Mars but Parakrama? Mars is how we go about getting things. It's our will. And so we can see that this time period is where that's developing. And if there is an affliction to Mars, there's going to be an affliction to this time period and its development of these psychosocial skills. Erik Erikson and Freud, they both divided Mercury into 2 different time periods. First part for the development of purpose, and the second for the development of competency. And when we think about Mercury as 10th house Karaka, what am I doing? What's my purpose? Where am I going? And competency of I can do this. And this is an element of Mercury that a lot of times we think, oh, Mercury's writing, Mercury's speech. but Mercury has this deeper fundamental principle in developing purpose and competency and our ability to say, oh, what am I going to be doing and giving to the world? What's the work I'm going to be doing for the world? How am I going to be making money in this world? And this is, we might think that you don't develop this till you go to college, but we can see that when somebody goes to college and they're not able they're not being successful, and they're not being successful getting a job after, there is this deeper correlation to the 10th house Karaka Mercury that happened earlier in life. And therapists, they go back and they work with this on a psychological level. We can work with it from a pure Jyotish perspective. Then we look at the Venus period, and he says this is where fidelity is developed. This is where faith and our ability to be true to things is developed. It's extremely, to me, amazing to look at what he, from a scientific perspective, understood from this time period, and then to look at how the rishis put these planets and the similarity, the overlap. For the Jupiter time period, he associated it with love. And he says love, but this is not love as passion love. This is the deeper love that a parent has. This is the ability to be connected, to have a family, to be connected to the wife, to be connected to the children, to be connected to the people at work. This deeper ability to connect, the Akash Tattva of Jupiter. And then when we look at the sun, we can see he associated it with care here. And care, he means care of the future generations, care of those who are coming after us. And then he put Saturn into, and after Kṣaṇāti's lecture of how important Saturn is to really bring us into our purpose, look at this. He connected it to wisdom. It's that final purification of are you being an old wise person, or are you still stuck in your junk? Did Saturn refine you, or did he not? And so I'm going to go a little bit deeper into each of these so that we can understand them a little bit more. And so the moon Naisargika time period. And so this is the psychological stuff. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more about the Jyotish. When this moon is afflicted, it has the ability to show issues happening in the home, issues happening with the caregivers to the child. And you won't find this in any Jyotish text, but when we understand what Erik Erikson said is happening, we understand moon is mother and the nurturing role. And we look at a chart, you'll see there's this incredible correlation that first year shows how the baby is being cared for and how well is the development happening of the things that are supposed to happen at this time. And some of the things that are supposed to happen at this time is, how do I connect with mother? How do I connect with father? And this connection to mother and father will influence how you connect to intimate people for the rest of your life. This can I depend on mother and father? This will show, do I have hope? Can I believe in things? And the breakdown of that connection is a root of there being more depression or anxiety in life, because the child didn't get their needs met. They're oh my gosh, is somebody going to be here? And sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not there, and we get this anxiety. It's and then sometimes when that nurturing is not there at all, what happens is the child gives up. My needs aren't going to be met. I'm not going to be taken care of. And we plant the seed for future depression. Now, the Western psychologists, they say it's how mom and dad treated the baby this first year. From our perspective as Jyotishis, that was in the birth chart. If it was in the birth chart at the moment they were born, they chose this situation to be born into. They had a certain karma to be born into. So this Naisargika is telling us that we can't blame mom and dad. It's a collective karma, that it was your karma to have the mom and dad that you had, to be treated in the way that you were treated, because it was your karma to have that depression or anxiety or a completely healthy mind, or whatever it is that the individual has. There's this mutual karma between mother, father, and child. All of this we can see by understanding the moon and the Naisargika time period. And when we fully understand the moon, we can talk to somebody about the first year of their life and situations that were arising in the first year of life. Then we look at Mars. And Mars, this is where we develop boundaries. Kids break lots of things. Pundit Sanjay Rath says, let them break whatever they want. which is a nice concept, but depending about how expensive your items in your home are, my 5-year-old the other day, I don't know what he was doing, but our oak dining table is completely scratched crazy. And so boundaries, we have to have some boundaries, but we don't want too much boundaries. And the development of how our parents and caregivers are interacting with us at this time will impact how our boundaries develop, which becomes very important for, in the future, how we protect ourselves, how we take care of ourselves. Do we overreact? Do we let people take advantage of us? A lot is going on here. And I think that's enough to go into. Mercury time period. And as I said, there's 2 stages of development that Mercury encompasses. And it's quite interesting. Mercury is a dual kind of guy anyway. So he's taking on these 2 levels of development. One of the important things they say at this time is kids, they're imitating. They're constantly imitating what's around them. And they're learning by imitating. And before age 7, kids don't need to learn grammar. They don't need to pick up a book and study it. Before age 7, if they hear it, they'll start speaking it. And after 7, that just kind of on a graph, their ability to do that just goes straight down each year after. Then you got to study grammar. It's not just automatically being picked up. So that first phase of this Mercury time period is showing the development of language skills, mind functioning, and afflictions to Mercury will show that children are having a harder time in this period of grade school. And often if we see that Mercury is afflicted, because sometimes you get a child, they're 2 months old. The parents just, they want to say, what, tell me about my child. What should I do? What should I focus? If we see Mercury's weak, we want to make sure that there's some remedies, a puja or something of this nature done the first day they go to school. And it's nice to do a little home Saraswati puja, no matter what. But if Mercury's afflicted, let's have a pujari, do a proper puja. Let's get rid of some of the difficulty that they would have right away. Let's not wait till afterwards. And one of the example charts I have for Mercury is Einstein's chart. We can see that his Mercury was Nietzsche. And it eventually got Nietzsche Bunga, but it was Nietzsche with malefics. And he had all this difficulty in school. Imagine if his parents did the proper Mercury remedies. And then for such a brilliant man, he had a lot of challenges. He couldn't even get into a good university because of all those challenges. The right Mercury remedial measures would have helped him out so much. Then we have Venus. And so Venus, we say 12, but it's puberty. And puberty is where our brain starts changing, our thought process starts changing. We're looking at we're looking for partnering, and we're learning to how do I interact in this way? How do I have intimacy. How am I connecting? Venus is this rajas. We're connecting, which is slightly different than the connection that Jupiter does. Jupiter is this deep connection that's going to be there forever. Venus is a rajas connection. It's connecting because I need something. I want to get something. And so this relationship development is happening during this time period. And if Venus is afflicted, like severely afflicted, it's often one of the simple remedies is don't get married till Jupiter Naisargika. If you're going to get married in Venus Naisargika and Venus is afflicted, all the affliction of Venus is going to show up. Late marriage in this case, sometimes people come and particularly in some cultures, if you're not married by 30, it's a bad thing. In America, no one is getting married before 30, but in some cultures, to not be married by 30, it's like, oh my gosh. And if Venus is debilitated and afflicted or whatever is wrong with Venus, say it's great that they're not married. And I often say, let's focus on, and I find something else that needs to be developed in the chart. And I say, late marriage is wonderful for this person. Then we have Jupiter. And Jupiter is this stage where we begin to fulfill our dharma. We begin we should have figured out what we're doing, and we're beginning to do what our role in the world is. And if Jupiter is very afflicted, a person might begin to lose purpose, lose what they're doing, have difficulties connecting, everything of this, the natural significations of Jupiter. Then we have the sun time period. And this sun time period, it's the golden years. And some people at 50 to 70, the golden years, this is golden, sun is golden. This is the time period where you still have enough juice in your body to move, to do things, to accomplish. And you're wise now. Because when you were young, yeah, you got all the energy, but the direction isn't always perfect unless you have a very strong sun. And so this is the time period where it's about giving back. It's becoming an elder in the community. And we have this issue in some of the first world countries where when they enter the stage, they decide to go play golf, retire on the beach and golf all day. And they're not giving back to society. They're not working selflessly, uplifting. And this, after a time period, creates depression. It's going to create Parkinson's. It's going to create Alzheimer's. It's the body is going to weaken, and negative issues are going to arise out because we're not fulfilling the role of this stage of life. And then we have Saturn. And in the Saturn period, did we do what we needed to do? And what are we focused on now? Because the body is failing. It becomes difficult to do the works in life that we've done. And some people work till they're 86, but it becomes more difficult. You can't work the same amount. And so at this time period, from the Vedic perspective, we should begin being less attached to the world. This is the time period where we should completely be focused on what the soul needs, the soul development. And I have a little quote here from Ptolemy. And why from Ptolemy? Because Ptolemy also discusses Naisargika Dasha. There's a whole Greek Naisargika Dasha. And Ptolemy says, and so this is here as we jump into beginning to integrate. He says, when predicting the results of a chart, first we have to consider the cultural conditions. The cultural conditions of an individual, just as we don't expect a straight-haired white person to be born in Ethiopia or a curly-haired black person born in Germany, or a literate person born in Germany and an illiterate person born in Greece. So this is his time period. And he's saying, and it's quite a quote, you know, these days somebody might have an issue with it, but the intent is take context into account. Where is a person? Where are they being born? What is the situation? What is the Desha Kalapatra? And then he says, one should not predict things in an infant that can only be done in manhood, or procreation to one is too old. One should instead predict circumstances appropriate by observing the period of life. And then he begins teaching the Naisargika. So he teaches these time periods very, very similarly to the Vedic teaching. And he says, teach and predict accordingly, guide accordingly. And sometimes we give predictions, sometimes we're giving guidance. And it is so important that we're aware of these phases of life as we're giving guidance. Now, I went right to examples. I'm going to do this integration first. Let's see, it should be there. So integrating this, there's so many different levels of who we are, different levels of time. And this is my kitty that's joining us right here. So many different levels of who we are, and she's looking at you guys. She's looking at the bar of people there. There's so many different levels of who we are, and you have children who are artists. You have adults who are taking time off to be spiritual. We have so many different elements of what's happening in our life. When we use Naisargika, we don't, in my understanding and utilization of Vimshotri, we don't throw Vimshotri out and just use Naisargika. I like to say that we use Naisargika first. We look at what phase a person is in. We look at how that phase is being experienced by them. We understand how the natural inherent human elements are being experienced. And then we can put Vimshotri on top. And by doing that, it fine tunes how we use Vimshotri. It makes it so that if we see that the Venus is completely afflicted and in a very distraught situation, and there's a time period in Vimshotri where we see that relationship is going to come up, we might not predict marriage. It might be a marriage, but it doesn't mean it's going to, it might be a relationship, but it doesn't mean that the chance of that fructifying into a marriage is as likely. And so simple little way to begin integrating, and it gets more specific than that, but this is the simple way to start integrating. And when we're integrating these dasha, to me, I like to see Naisargika as almost it's like this floor. And I put a Rashi Dasha next, because a Rashi Dasha next is saying what kind of situations, what's the environment looking like for this person? And then the Vimshotri, how are they interacting in that realm? What are they doing in that realm? And then we get Shula Dasha and Mula Dasha and some of these other dasha that we start fine-tuning what is happening in these time periods. And as we begin to utilize these multiple dashas, it allows us to very much fine-tune and find confluence where, yes, this is definitely going to happen in this time. Or we see something happening in Vimshotri, but nothing else is supporting it. Then it's not very likely. We might tell somebody, hey, maybe you should make sure you have a good insurance policy during this time, but unlikely there's going to be any problem. We see the Naisargika not working out well, Vimshotri indicating some problems, Shula indicating some problems. It's not a good Chara Dasha. Then that's the time we want to be worried. We want to make sure, hey, make sure you visit the doctor twice this year. Make sure that it's a very good insurance policy, and let's do some remedies here. So this allows us to really have some surety of how something is unfolding. And if that sounds overwhelming, if you're new to Jyotish, remember, start with Vimshotri. Vimshotri, in my level 1 classes, I only do Vimshotri. But the next dasha that I teach in my level 2 is Naisargika. I say, let's make sure that we're understanding what's underneath of this Vimshotri. And then I next teach a Rashi Dasha. And then I teach Shula and Mula. So that way people can be fine tuning. So just as how are we integrating this with, how are we integrating all these dasha? Don't try and integrate them all at once. Take your time. Learn Vimshotri first, then go to get some Naisargika. And there's a multiple I mentioned in the beginning, Naisargika dashas. Get one or two under your belt. Then there's a nice progression that we can take where it's not overwhelming, but very enjoyable because you get more and more and more fine-tuned in your predictions. So this, and my time is ticking.
We're right about 29 minutes.
Okay, so a few examples, and then I'm just gonna have a 1 minute mention of the Antar dashas in this. But here's Einstein's chart. We can see his Mercury is Nietzsche. It's with 2 malefics. And we can see that he had a difficulty learning in that his early grade school teacher said he'd never amount to anything. We had the Nietzsche Banga come later in life when Venus finally gave some Nietzsche Banga to Mercury, but he didn't fully, even when he came up with a lot of his theories and a lot of people liked him, they weren't proven. A lot of people said, this guy's a little nuts. Not until his 40s was he fully able to be recognized. And so not until Jupiter came was he able to get some recognition. And we look over here. And so this is just an example of, I had a client, she was 47-ish, and she had gone to an Indian astrologer. He gave her, she had been married in her Venus. It was a terrible marriage. We see that Venus is 6th house Marnakarkasthana with 2 malefics and aspected by Rahu. It was a very tough marriage in that Venus Naisargika time period. She got divorced. She entered Jupiter. If we look, Jupiter's afflicted as well, and Nietzsche, and it has no sambandha with Venus. If we look, Venus is not connected to Jupiter. And so the relationship was not happening, was not coming about. And she had an astrologer giving her 1,000,001 remedies and pujas to do, saying, oh, you get a relationship before you're 50. You're getting so old, nobody's going to want you. I looked at the chart. Why do all these pujas at this time period? Jupiter's not going to give. I look at Sun. Sun is a malefic in the 6th house. Malefics are okay in the 6th house. And it's conjunct Venus. So it shows there's love in that Naisargika time period. I said, you can try this, but come. And so I didn't even start looking at predicting when a relationship would arise. There was a few potential Vimshotri time periods that could have given a relationship. But based on the Naisargika, I said it's not going to come in those. I waited till the Sun, and I looked at when in Vimshotri is indicating a relationship after she turns 50. And spot on, she met him. He was running the company with her. And yes, so this is a way to fine tune. All right. I was going to mention a little bit about the Antara and some of the variations. Naisargika is, you can find it in Jagannath Hora. You can find it in Deva Guru. Both of these programs have a wonderful utilization of, they calculate the Naisargika for you. All right. And I guess we can stop share. All right. So that was my run through Naisargika, but hopefully I not only explained Naisargika, but how it fits in with everything else, and how you can grow your dashas. Yes.
Thank you, Freedom, so much. Really just an awesome synastry and synchronicities between the ancient Naisargika system and modern psychology and philosophy. It really gives us some food for thought and a way to develop another dasha system in a way where, you know, it's very accessible now through your presentation. So can't thank you enough.
And if it's natural, science should be able to discover it. It would throw Shivananda, his definition of Vedas was, if you take all the Vedas, throw them in the ocean, and meditate, what you rediscover, this is true Veda. That was his definition of Vedas. It's there, it's inherent in the universe.
Beautiful. Any other Jyotisha like to comment, Visti ji? And then
I have to leave. I'm just going to say that I have to leave. So thank you, everyone. I have some sessions. So thank you, and you all take care. It was a pleasure to spend time with you. And I'm sorry I'm going to miss Eve and Vishti, but I have to run. So thank you all.
Namaste, Sadasiva.
Shivaya.
Visti, would you like to comment?
Hey, brother. How you doing?
Good.
It was fun. Hey, have you tried Dasha Pravesh with Naisargika Dasha Mahadashas?
I haven't done much with Dasha Pravesh with him.
I tried it. It's amazing. You know, you're guessing whether you should be using the Vimshotri to figure out something that's going to happen in a Naisargika Dasha. You just open that Dasha Pravesh in the beginning of 12 years of age of Venus Dasha beginning, and you check, is the first and seventh lord having yoga? Is this person going to have boyfriends, girlfriends? In this Wow, done. You're set, man.
And so just for people that don't know Dasha Pravesh, Visti is going to be explaining what that is in a moment.
Yeah.
So there's a question in the question box, and it talks about LGBTQIA plus people in Venus period. And notice I didn't say finding your wife or spouse. I said finding your partner. And this time period is it's that love and interaction, whether it's whichever gender format somebody is interested in. How they both, doesn't matter what your gender preference is, you will have. There's some people that have wonderful relationships with kindness and such, and there's other people that have relationships that are arguing and breaking all the time. So it's about the relationship. It's not about what gender preference you have. The Venus is just sexuality energy in general. It's that which arises at puberty.
Visti, something else, sir?
Have you worked, brother, on anything to do with mapping houses into Naisargika dashas? You know, like Udayika chakra? I'm speaking something from our tradition now.
Yeah.
It's all coming out. You know? Next to my
Are you talking
brother,
about like the Rashi Dasha wise, or?
Well, for the Naisargika dasha, like
Yeah.
the Vimshotri, we have that Udayika chakra, right?
Yeah.
Just to explain you guys what it means, it's not a secret. You have the first dasha and Vimshotri that corresponds to first house in Navamsha. Second house Vimshotri, second house in Navamsha. Third dasha Vimshotri, third house in Navamsha. There's this idea that behind every dasha there is like a background running, just like I explained with Vimshotri, and then there's the. Somebody says my voice is low. Can everybody hear me?
You're okay. Yeah, you're good.
I'm okay. So just like with Vimshotri, there's a first dasha, but there's something running in the back, like houses running in the back. So we have this for every dasha according to our tradition. So with Naisargika dasha, it's a bit of an odd dasha. There's only 7 dashas. So how do we map it to any houses? We can't use the Navamsha in the same way. So Freedom, have you worked on that?
Not mapping the houses, but just you mentioned Navamsha. It's so important to bring Navamsha in for all of the Naisargika. And one thing I've been playing with is, or researching, is bringing in the pertinent divisional chart for the Naisargika. And it's interesting to see. It's not just the Rashi and the Navamsha, but the divisional is also having an impact. Just the inherent natural way, the inherent way that a career unfolds for somebody, the inherent relationship to the parents.
Freedom, just a quick question about Naisargika. With the transition from one phase of the Naisargika to the other, is it like Vimshotri in terms of it's a dramatic shift, or is it more like an energetic transition? Do you still feel the effects of the previous dasha in the early part of the newer dasha, or what would you say?
Beautiful question. it's going to depend on the strength of the planet. And as an example, if Mars is very strong, it will almost start, it'll eat up some of the moon Naisargika. And one of the indications of Mars Naisargika starting is walking. So the baby's crawling, all of a sudden at 1 year old, the baby starts walking. And so this is that transition to Mars. And if we look, if Mars is very strong, like the Ruchaka Mahapurushas and such, they often start walking early. And it's almost that walking early is thereby a sign of a certain level of aggressiveness, where if Mars is very weak, or afflicted, and when I say weak, afflicted house, there's multiple indications. And I'm being general with that. But if Mars has some issue with it, I guess that's better than using the term weak. If Mars has issue, then walking can be delayed. And thereby that Mars Naisargika is on a certain, it might have started at a certain time from our Jyotish calculations, but as far as the effects, they're being delayed arising. Similarly with Mercury, if Mercury has some issues, the speaking and the clarity of the speaking is delayed. Where if Mercury is very strong, the speaking has the potential to come early. So in this way, it depends on the strength of the planet, how that overlap is actually happening. But it's amazing how it does overlap.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Dr. Pai, please. Oh, sorry, we can't hear you, Dr. Pai.
You can't hear me?
Oh, now we can. We're good. We're good.
Oh, okay, great. Excellent presentation, Freedom Ji. Love the presentation and the connection that you've shown. Your research is very in-depth. I was just wondering with this Naisargika Dasha system, if we know these systems, that what would be active during a particular time, can we use the Dasha Avatar also to understand the system, the Dasha Avatars of Vishnu?
I haven't applied them in that way, but I don't see why not.
Right, because if you, I'm seeing, certain yogas like the Balarista yogas, which happen, in the first year when the moon is active. I was wondering if anything related to Krishna can be done when, like the baby Krishna who's in the cradle or things like that. Is that going to help? And then we have the Mars, which is more of Kurma, the Narasimha avatar,
Exactly.
where they're educated, they're trying to break things, the children, and then you go to the Mercury Dasha, which is more like Buddha, in their education, early education, before they go into the Venus. So I'm just seeing if you have studied or your tradition has looked at any
from the tradition, the avatars are used to bring sattva, to exalt a planet.
Right.
And so they're really making it healthy, and they're making it so that it's a balanced time period. Like almost as I mentioned before, if Mars is too strong or Mars is too weak, we're getting this variation happening. So we can see that there's almost a rajas tamas element, coming too soon, coming too late. And if we're using avatars, we're bringing sattva to a graha. So I'm using whatever I get very specific with the remedy based on the chart and the house and where it is in the Varga charts and such. But as a general remedy, the avatars would be wonderful.
And what is the correlation again with anything with the Jyotirlingas of where these planets are in the natal chart? Would that also have a bearing on
you could do Jyotirlingas, maybe if Marnakarkasthana or such of this nature. I wouldn't use Jyotirlinga as much for developmental purposes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As much. A certain chart might require that, but it wouldn't be my first go-to.
Sure. Okay. No, I was just looking, what does your tradition, Jyotish Parampara, talk about when it comes to the Naisargika? If there is anything mentioned in the tradition, then that would be really
for the Maha, it's more based on the chart. When we get into the Antar Dasha of the Naisargika, the Antara of the Naisargika is based on where the planets are placed from the Mahadasha Lord.
Mahadasha, yeah.
And so planets in the 2 and 12 from the Mahadasha Lord, we like to use Vishnu Rupas. Planets in the 6th and 11th from the Mahadasha Lord. To deal with those issues, we like to use Shiva Rupas. So there's a correlation with Antara, but with the Maha, it's natural, it's Naisargika. So it's what's happening to that, how is that, the condition of that planet showing up? And it would depend on what the affliction is, which Devata Rupa would be more ideal. But the avatars, in my level 1 course, the first remedies I teach is the avatars, because you can never go wrong when you use the avatars. You can never mess something up. It's only making things better in a person's life.
Excellent. Thank you, Visti.
Yes.
Freedom Ji. Yeah, thanks.
I can maybe answer one part of your question, Arjun.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead, Visti Ji, please. Yeah.
The 7 dashas are the Saptamatrika.
Right. Yeah.
That's why Dharma Hero spoke only about, for every Mahadasha, which women are in your life.
And in Tamil Nadu, they talk about Saptakanis as well. Like we talk about the Saptamatrikas, and Ashtamatrikas are also there if you're using.
That depends on, yes, that depends on whether you are dividing the last Chandra Aksharas into one group or 2 groups, because the 7 groups of Aksharas are related to the Saptamatrika, and they're also the remedies for the body. And those are the 7 dashas. And
so
what Freedom is not saying is that we are having an ongoing discussion that might be that there's an option to have an 8th dasha in Naisargika dasha, which is the Lagna dasha.
That's what even I would
Ashtamatrika that you're getting into right there.
And the Ashtabhairavas.
But the Ashtabhairavas are meant to protect the matrikas.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
Because when she passed away, she lost her body and gave it up, to be more precise, Sati. Then Rudra took the form of Bhairava to protect her body.
That's right.
And that's when he distributed the aksharas. Actually, her body, the matrikas, were distributed, and they became the nagara for the devas, the resting place for the devas, the abodes, the houses or place of living for the devas in the aksharas. So absolutely.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. Just adding that question is magic for Freedom's lecture. Beautiful stuff.
Yeah. Thanks. I think even I wanted probably Visti to answer that, because it's a mistake I did. I said thank you instead of saying Freedom Ji. I said Visti Ji. Maybe that was an indication of the universe saying he's going to answer that question as well. Oh. So, but really appreciate
almost indistinguishable tradition. You know what to do. All copies of our teacher.
Yeah, and in general, anything that makes the planet stronger, anything that makes the planet more healthy is going to help in that time period.
Right.
So we can get specific, and then we can be general.
Right.
And if you don't know about for those who are listening who don't know about Saptamatrika, do what you know to make that Naisargika Graha Dasha Lord strong, to really help support what's happening in that time of life. Just making a note for everyone else out there. Yes.
Wow. Well, speaking of mirroring your teacher, while you were speaking, Freedom, Sanjay messaged me on Telegram, told me he's enjoying our summit today very much. So that's good news. And clearly you can see how your presentation all has our consciousness feeling curious and expansive.
There's so much more there in Naisargika. That was the summary. So.
Well, you certainly did it justice. I'm confident. So next, I would like to introduce Visti Larsen, who's going to be discussing Shula Dasha and its Dasha Pravesh. Visti Ji.
Namaste. Thank you, Kṣaṇāti. And I'll start with sharing my screen right away. I don't want to take too much of our time doing anything else than just showing you what I've got for you. And let's see, can I do so? Yes. And here we are. So, Shula Dasha Pravesha Chakra. And what I'll be presenting today is as every time Kṣaṇāti asks me, Visti, do you want to lecture on a topic for the summit or for any summit? I think, what is that topic that I have been putting off to study properly because I didn't have time or didn't have focus? But now that somebody asks me, I'm going to take out some time and put some energy into studying it. So this became that. Because I was taught this Shula Dasha years ago. For Freedom and I, it's been a long time that we've studied this particular Dasha. I'll explain a bit more in this. But what I wanted to study is, you see, when you're reading the birth chart, you run into this big obstacle in that you're reading a chart which is supposed to last the person's entire life with some good luck, 120 years, with some average luck, 80, all right, 70. And you're expecting to see everything in that one chart from 9 grahas, you're at 12 signs. If you're really well versed, maybe you're going to add a divisional chart or a few divisional charts to this. You will get a bit more complexity to the chart, but you're going to expect to justify everything based on their birth chart. And you're not going to be confirming your predictions without anything but the birth chart, unless you start looking at what we call charts for the beginning or advent of the dasha. And so Shula Dasha is a dasha which is focused on your health and your longevity. Now, you know you're talking to somebody from our tradition of Achyutananda, when the two you invite from the tradition, one talks on Naisargika Dasha, which is what we call the backdrop of Phalita, the backdrop of general use dashas. And the other one talks about Shula Dasha, which is the backdrop of all the health dashas. What am I trying to say? In our tradition, somebody says, oh, let's look at Dasha. In the background, without any thought put into it, in our tradition, we're thinking about how old is this person? Which Naisargika Dasha are they in? Whilst thinking about that, we look at the chart and look at Vimshotri Dasha, or we look at the chart and read Narayan Dasha, or we look at the chart and read Trikona Dasha, what a beautiful Dasha, or Tribhagi Dasha, or Tribhagi Phala of the Vimshotri Dasha. All right, there's the backdrop of the chart. That backdrop we have in the back of our mind. I was given this anecdote that in our tradition, every astrologer picks one natural dasha in the backdrop and then reads the regular dasha on the screen or on the chart. And so we were taught that Parashara's advice is to read Naisargika Dasha or Varnada Dasha, something we are not bringing to fore here. Okay, very important dasha. If you ask me which dasha I teach my students first, I teach them Naisargika Dasha first, Varnada Dasha second, and then we talk about other dashas. All right, we do that in the tradition. And then this Shula Dasha is also taught by Parashara, and it's also taught by Jaimini. A lot of the elaboration on interpretation comes from the Jaimini Sutras. And this Shula Dasha is the backdrop of reading longevity. So this is not the longevity Dasha. This is the backdrop of reading longevity. And when you see how this works, you say it's so simple how it works. It's very, very simple. The dashas are all for 9 years each without alteration. So imagine a regular system that says your first dasha is 9 years, your second dasha is 9 years, your third dasha is 9 years, your fourth dasha is 9 years, 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, 54, 63, 72, 81, 90, 99, 108 is the last dasha from 99 to 108. It's set. It's based on that every antadasha, now here comes the link, every antadasha, there are 12 antadashas, you take 9 years, divide into 12 portions, equal portions, you're going to get 9 months each. So what are these 9 months? They are the 9 months we spent in our womb, the womb of our mother. This is obviously an average. Somebody's going to say, I spent 7 months. Should I use 7 years for each dasha? Please don't. Don't spoil it. Don't do that. Somebody will say, well, mine was 8 months and so many days. Can I make the adjustment? Please do the research. I won't do it. That's too much for me. Imagine having to guess for every person who is coming to you for a chart reading, how many months they spend in the womb and adjusting the longevity dashas from it. But there must be a system. But this is the average method. The average method takes into account how long the mother was attempting to create you for. If she missed a few days, sorry, you weren't as well baked in the oven. Okay, what to do? But this is the average. And these 9 months set the scale for the 9-year Mahadashas of the Shula Dasha. And you'll think, Visti, is this a useful Dasha? Well, that's why it's the backdrop of the Dashas. But I'll show you that it's useful. It's the backdrop of the longevity dasha. So this is where you should be asking the question, oh, there are other longevity dashas. You can use Vimshotri for longevity effectively. You can use Narayan for very effectively. Naisargika dasha is a fantastic longevity dasha if used well. Okay. Some of the popular longevity dashas out there, Brahma dasha, Chara dasha. Okay. There is also Navamsha dasha. Bit secret dasha. Bit secret dasha. So this is the backdrop. Now, what I will be showing is that based on this system, that every dasha is 9 years each, it's as if your body is undergoing a very important event every 9 years. Every 9 years, the dasha is changing. And for the next 9 years, the whole 9 years will be based on what were the transits when the dasha changed. That's called dasha pravesh chakra. We won't jump straight into it. I'll show you a few principles of the Mahadasha first, and then I'll elaborate on the dasha pravesh chakra. But the idea is such a very simple system, 9 years each. Let's get into it. So I wish to share some principles first. Some of these can be derived from the Jaimini Sutra. I had to add a few from the tradition, which are not secrets, but if I didn't add them, it would not be useful. Okay. Don't worry, these will repeat. If you make notes now, it's fine. If not, don't worry. I'll have your back later. And by the way, I think I wanted to share. Now everybody also can see the slides. You have the link to the slides in chat. I forgot to do that earlier. So these principles, the first is we want to know when is the Shula Dasha negative. There are 4 main conditions. I don't list all of the conditions, but 4 main ones. And these are if the dasha isn't, the Mahadasha, which we're going to look at, is in trines to the 2nd or 8th lord. If the dasha is aspected by 3 or more malefics, that's called Tripapa Yoga. If the dasha is influenced by both Mars and Moon, or both Venus and Moon, that's called Rudra Yoga. That means the Divine Mother is angry with you. Okay, hint, hint, which remedy to do. If there is some Marana Yoga, so I said this is something we call Marana Karksthana, but the idea is if you have some combinations which look like death yogas, then obviously that dasha associated with the death yogas becomes negative. Keep in mind, this dasha is a sign-based dasha, 9 years each, starting from Lagna or starting from the 7th house. So either your dasha is starting from Lagna or from 7th house. And regularly, one by one, it'll go through the houses. First, if it starts from 1st house, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. It starts from the 7th house, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are the houses. I hope everybody can still hear me clearly. There's no interruption. And so that's how it works. And if one of these houses gets influenced by these yogas, it can be a problem for health in that dasha. If your longevity permits, you can die in that dasha, unfortunately. All right. Note, I said, if your longevity permits. I didn't assume you will die in every dasha, which is bad. You might have a few of these. If you see the first principle here, it says Rudra Shula, trines to the 2nd or 8th lord. If you have your 2nd and 8th lords in different houses, you will have 6 signs to choose from, right? No, no, no. We will choose the most negative of the second and eighth lords. Then you have 3 signs to choose from. All right? That still doesn't do it because you can only die in 1 of them, not 3 of them, right? So there are exceptions and there are a few checks and balances we go through to make sure we figure out which of these are relevant. One of the checks and balances is to see in step 2 here, your soul significator, your Atma Karaka, the one who has brought you to this planet, will save you at least once. At least once. I'll say it can save you more times, but once. Sure. All right. First time. First one is free. Jupiter can save any sign except Capricorn, its debility. So we can do a few checks and balances between these first 2 principles, which are negative, which are positive. I will show you this shortly, but then we'll get into the nitty-gritty because we might have still a few signs to go through which are negative, and we have to sort them out. And then we have step 3. The moon is the giver of your body. If the moon is poorly placed in transit when the dasha begins, we have a problem. Okay? Because then the body will fail. If the moon is in 8th or 12th especially, then it's quite negative for the bodily health. We have a 4th principle. These are easy principles, and we're only going to use this in the transit chart. If the lord of the dasha is debilitated, so if you're running the dasha of your 2nd house and the 2nd lord is debilitated in the transit chart, that can be a problem. If there are in that transit chart planets debilitated in quadrants or trines from the ascendant. Ascendant as what? The transit ascendant. We are going to draw the transit ascendant. We're going to be that precise. Then it's also dangerous for longevity. I'll repeat these. So don't worry. After this slide, you'll see them again. I just had to show you what we were doing. Let's see. For me, the slide is stuck for some reason. No. Is it all good? Oh, there we are. So this was the next slide. Oh, we went a bit further. There we are. Yeah. So here we are. So I was preparing to show you a whole host of charts for this presentation. And then I discovered one chart that had everything. This was Betty Ford's chart. I got so inspired reading her story, her biography, and her chart. It started with the chart. I found this chart and I said, wow, this chart is going places. This chart is exciting. I'm just going to spend the whole lecture just presenting this chart because it has everything I wanted to show in the principles. All right. So, and you can see I've done a bit of drawing and some images and all of that. So, I hope you enjoy. So what do we do here first? Betty Ford's chart, she's born 8 April 1918. She's born in Chicago, Illinois. I have used the given time as 3:45 p.m. And you'll notice I'm going to stick to the Rashi chart here. Navamsha is relevant, but I'm sticking to the Rashi chart. In the tradition, we will especially look at something called the D30 chart in comparison to this. But for our purposes today, it's not going to be relevant. What am I showing here? There were 4 principles that I wanted to expand on in this, but of these 3 are present in Betty Ford's chart. Rudra Shula. Let's start. Her 2nd lord is either Mercury, or it is Jupiter. Notice for those who know better that I'm not treating the other lord of Virgo as Rahu or the other lord of Pisces as Ketu in this context. But I'm looking at Jupiter and Mercury. Now, among Jupiter and Mercury in this chart, if you can see beyond all the lines I drew, Mercury is in a bit more difficult position than Jupiter solely by being the less benefic planet and also receiving some negative aspects in the chart. All right. You can dwell on this in the handout example I've given, so you can download that and check it out. But what I'm pointing out here is I have selected, hey, in this chart, Mercury is more negative than Jupiter. And as a result of which, I am basing the most negative trine in this chart based on the fiery signs. So if you're, let's say, using the North Indian chart here, Mercury is in Aries, and the trines to that are the fiery signs. So I put a triangle. This we call Rudra Shula. This means there is danger to this person's health during either Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius Dasha. Some of you may have read from my Dasha notes here. This is from the software deva.guru. I use this almost exclusively, deva.guru. You can find it online. That I've already had the notes here that she passed away in Sagittarius Dasha. Don't worry, I won't just show you, I'll also prove I'm looking at here. Now, then we have to also look at, is there something called Tripapa Yoga? Tripapa Yoga literally means three malefics. So is there a sign or associated or aspected by three malefics? Now, in Betty Ford's chart, you will notice that there are three malefics, Rahu, Sun, and Ketu. They're in quadrants to each other in dual signs. So they share sign aspect with each other. Rashi Drishti, we call it. This Rashi Drishti is shared between the dual signs, and therefore they are very negative, these dual signs in this particular chart. So I put a red square from that nuclear sign here, nuclear danger sign, right? And said this red square is the most negative square in the chart, in this chart. Tripapa Yoga. So I marked that as well. So we as astrologers are marking everything before we get into the analysis. You know, all options. It's very mathematical. Then finally, we have Rudra Yoga. You can see an appropriate, danger of shock, right? The Rudra Yoga is formed by Venus and Moon. They are joined in this chart. They didn't have to be joined. They could just mutually aspect each other. That would be a problem as well. And in this context, because they joined each other, the signs they aspect are problematic. And this is again sign aspect. So while Venus and Moon are in Aquarius, they share aspects with Aries and Cancer and Libra. Go look up Rashi Drishti, guys. That's important in this context. Now, you can see a problem here. And this is the problem I wanted to present from the beginning. There are a whole lot of dangerous signs in this chart. I have listed 9 signs which are dangerous. 9. And this is how we do it in the tradition. Now, some of you will say, if some repeats, does that make them more dangerous? Maybe. But that's not the point I'm going to make first. I want to show you how we first filter this information. So this is her chart again, but I'm using step 2. I want to know which signs Atma Karka influences and which ones Jupiter influences. So the grand Jupiter is placed in Taurus. The sign aspects of Taurus will be on Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So those signs are no longer dangerous for this person. The person is safe. This person is born with their Atma Karka planet, the planet with highest degrees, being Rahu. I counted this in reverse because Rahu moves in reverse. And if Rahu was part of those 3 malefics I mentioned earlier called Tripapa Yoga, remember Sun, Rahu, Ketu? Well, suddenly he's going to remove some of the negatives. He's going to say, well, maybe one of those 4 signs is not going to be as dangerous anymore. The first one, that depends on Dasha. So if I say that the dual signs were Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, which of these will be the first Dasha? In Betty Ford's chart, her Dashas begin from the 7th house because there are more planets in 7th than in Lagna. And the first among the dual signs is Pisces. You'll see here, Aquarius, Pisces. You doubt me, you open a software which calculates Shula Dasha. You just check which of these Dashas came first. Pisces in this case. So the person won't die in Pisces. They won't suffer in Pisces. The soul has saved them. And then finally, one more inference. Okay? Parivartana. This can change things. Exchanges. And in this person's chart, Cancer is having Saturn and Moon is in Aquarius. There's an exchange between Saturn and Moon. So whatever yoga I thought was this Venus Moon negative Rudra yoga I deemed earlier, it's all changed now. There's no Rudra yoga anymore. It's gone. Okay? It's not there. I will still, however, be careful of Cancer Dasha because it's as if Moon has gone to Cancer. And it's as if, and then I know Venus is still aspecting Cancer. So Cancer can still be a problem. So from 9 dasha, I've reduced this to 5 dasha. And I had to show this so that you wouldn't look at all 12 dashas. All right. I had to show that this is not just us blindly going to go through all the person's dashas of life one by one. So from here, we now have some work to do. I'm going to show you the transit charts for her 5 dashas that were negative for her. So this is how we do it. And please get these slides, go through them and read them. There's a lot of detail here. And I hope you will appreciate the detail. And here is the first of those negative dashas of her life. And this is not her birth chart anymore. This is her transit chart for her first dasha that I deemed negative, which was the dasha of Gemini. Should we just go back and check that out? I had said here that if we look at these trines, the fiery signs are a problem, all right? Then I had said that the signs of Sagittarius, Gemini, and Virgo are a problem. I don't think I marked it here, but Cancer is also a problem. Okay, so among these, if we say the person's dasha start from Aquarius, then we'll go Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. Oh, Aries should be a problem. Maybe it'll come up again. Maybe I messed up the order. Bear with me. Then Taurus, Gemini. That's also definitely a problem that we have to dwell on. Okay, so this is what we have to focus on. And let me see here. Is it because we skipped over Aries? That's not it, right? No. Okay, so maybe it'll come up later. Gemini was the first dasha I was worried about. Now, oh, there's a dasha missing here. Okay, 1 second. Guys, I hope you'll bear with me. I'm just going to see if I have, oh no, it's not here for some reason. Okay, sorry about that. My mess up, but we will focus on Gemini. There was something I thought was supposed to be there that I missed. Now, Gemini dasha, what was the principle when we look at this transit chart? This is going to define the person's longevity and health for 9 years. So the principle was, one of them was if moon was poorly placed. The moon here is in 9th house in this transit chart. That's not a bad thing. Okay, that's a very nice placement for health. The other principle was, as I listed here, or copied here, if the dasha lord is debilitated, or there are planets debilitated in quadrants or trines from the ascendant in the transit chart. So, are there any planets debilitated? Now, this sounds simple, right? We're just going to look for debility. And it seems to be debilitated here. Nobody else. Now, if you are used to reading the nodes debility, we will say Rahu is in Sagittarius, that's considered debility, and Ketu in Gemini is also considered debility. So this is supposed to be a problem. At the very least, if we know this is Gemini dasha, then Mercury debilitated is going to be a problem. The trines and quadrants, we have Ketu in 9th. That's going to be a problem if we deem its stability to be Gemini. But then the story is, not much happened in this dasha. It was very stressful. It was. And if you note carefully, if you consider Ketu as lording Pisces, then you know that Mercury and Ketu are in an exchange here. In our tradition, we'll say, oh, the person is saved from debility. Problem solved. This dasha was supposed to be negative, but there's an exchange happening. Something else happened. That usually implies it can be that another loved one suffered and not her. May I just point that out? In preparation for this, what I wanted to show you is a dasha in which it showed that instead of her suffering any injury, her father passed away when she was younger. This was in the previous dasha. I didn't manage to show that here. Sorry about that. But the point I wanted to put across is when a negative dasha comes, sometimes the negative is taken away by somebody else. And this annual chart, or excuse me, dasha chart can show that when the problem is taken away. So here I prove this was just stressful, but she didn't suffer because of an exchange. Let me show you the next dasha. This is when she was in the dasha of Cancer. You can see the chart has changed because this is a transit chart. And in this change of dasha, it was between, the dasha started in 1963. It would be during the solar return of her birthday in 63. This is how Shula dasha works. It's the solar return every 9 years. The transit chart looks like this. Are there any problems with debilitated planets here? We have to see the quadrants. No, there's no debility. Venus is not debilitated. Trines, no planets in debility. Okay, look at the moon. The moon is in 8th house. Oh, problem. Okay, right away you can say, this is the problem. Look at this time. These years will be problematic. 1 year into this dasha, in 1964, she experiences a pinch in her neck. And this becomes a painful nerve injury. She is, what I didn't write here is that she went into physical therapy. They treated her as if she had a disc prolapse disc. So there's a whole bunch of things people do to repair you from that, to heal you from that. But after the therapy, the physical therapy, she still was in pain. And they started treating her with painkillers, injections as well. So pills and injections. And she started also drinking more. And you can note here that the problem was from the moon. And in this chart, moon is the 6th lord. So the dasha chart is telling us the problem is coming from the 6th house. All right. This is the problem that she's facing. So moon is supposed to cause a problem to her body, but it's the 6th lord. So the problem could be related to, or in its root, causing an addiction. 6th house causes addictions. Weaknesses come from the 6th house. So what is your weakness? That is your addiction. 6th house. Some people say 12th house is addictions. I won't disagree that enjoyment of addictions comes from the 12th house, but what made you have the addiction to begin with is the 6th house. The weakness is the root of that. So this is where everything started when it comes to her difficulties health-wise, and also in matters of her mental well-being. And now we come to the next dasha of Leo. And we again have to see, are there any debilitated planets in quadrants or trines? So again, this is the transit chart from the year 1972. And we see in the quadrants, Mercury is debilitated. And we see in the trines, there's no other planet. We see moon is in the 8th house. What a terrible dasha. There's a debilitated planet in a quadrant and the moon is in the 8th house. That's quite negative. All right. And she's still suffering from pain in her body. She's still taking different types of drugs and she's still drinking. She ends up being confronted by her family that she should go into rehab. Those who know about her life, the Betty Ford Rehab Clinic was started in her name. She did go to a rehab that existed before the Betty Ford Clinic began, but she began a movement of helping people out of addictions through specialized clinics for this purpose. And you know that it's a problem when you have both debility and the moon poorly placed. So you can see that this is definitely a difficult dasha. Now, the question I would have asked is, so how do you get through such a dasha? Is there any saving grace in this dasha? Is there anything helping her in this dasha? Is there anything that can ensure that she gets through this easier? So the first thing we would express is, are there any strong benefics in this chart? Is there anything that could assist her in this chart? And you will say, well, Jupiter's in the 7th house. That's a strong benefic in quadrants, in own sign. Trust when I say that's not going to help. It won't help. What will help is something connected to the dasha. And she is in Leo dasha. The sun in the 10th house will help. The dasha lord is strong in this chart. So we say sun in 10th house is Digbala. So this is a strong dasha. The dasha wants her to tie over this. The dasha wants her to heal past this. That's the saving grace in this chart. Otherwise, why didn't she die? Should be your question. It's a terrible question, but this is the question we ask when we enter the topic of Shula Dasha. Why did the body not give up when you have two difficult factors? The Dasha Lord was strong. That's the answer. Tough questions we get into with Shula Dasha. This was her next dasha that I had lined up for her. Note, all the dashas I have selected were those that we picked out from the beginning as being poor for her. So I've just examined the transits for each of the dashas to deem how bad is the dasha. Okay? Now, in this dasha, again, 9 years, this is Virgo dasha. Who's the lord of the dasha? Mercury. Oh, here we go again, right? Mercury is debilitated in the 7th house. Terrible. How is she going to get through this? Is the moon poorly placed? No, the moon is in 9th house. Trust when I say you don't need moon and a debilitated planet to be negative for the dasha to be negative. You just need one. If you have more, it just means you're suffering more. Okay? But what is the saving grace if I say that this Mercury is poorly placed? Mercury is in a sign of Jupiter, and Jupiter is back in the ascendant. Isn't this Parivartana again? If it worked once, it'll work again. And it did. She was now suffering from cardiovascular diseases with a long life of stress and addictions and, 3 or 4 kids and 4 grandkids and a husband in politics. Of course, you'll have cardiovascular diseases when you were born in 1918 and it's now 1981. All right? I say well done. All right? Well done. So in 1987, she had a quadruple coronary bypass surgery. Quadruple coronary bypass surgery implies most likely that she had 4 blocked valves in her heart. And they had to do a bypass to overcome all those issues. If you know about stent surgery, stents are done for 1 or 2 valves where they're blocked. When you have 3 or more blocked, then you have to do a bypass. So this is quadruple coronary bypass. This is serious business. All right. And this is in 87. Okay. Blessings to all doctors who can do this type of work.
Just a quick heads up, you're at 32 minutes, brother.
I'm also about to conclude on her. Thank you. So this is what's going on. Now, she's saved by 2 factors I deem. Her Mercury in this chart, albeit is very poorly placed, is the only planet not combust in this chart by the sun in this transit chart. The exchange between Jupiter and Mercury, however, is the real saving grace, ensuring that this Mercury did not take her to the rest of her, to the other life, if you will, to the next life. And now we come to the last dasha on our list of concerns. Sagittarius Shula Dasha. She has lived very long by now. In 2008, she is what? At this stage, she's 90 years of age. I mean, well done, Betty Ford, I must say. Okay? And this is Sagittarius Dasha. Jupiter is not debilitated. All right. Is Moon poorly placed? No, it's not. Is there any planet debilitated in a quadrant or trine? There is Mercury. Now, is Mercury going to be saved from this? None. Not with Mercury, excuse me. All right. Is Venus going to save it? Planets joined a debilitated planet were not helping earlier. All right. So why should they do so this time unless they're the Lord of the Dasha? So no. Mercury decided this was enough. It was time for her to leave this planet. Mercury is also combust in this chart, may I note. It was very difficult to avoid this particular situation. Some of you will look on the right and want to examine especially the Nakshatra Lord of this time period. The Nakshatra will change for each of the solar returns. Very valuable information because the Nakshatra is responsible for our longevity here. Okay, so when you go through the slides, just have a quick look over there. And with that, we can see that the dashas which went through her life, which we deemed were negative or not, we could also see in the transit chart which ones were so negative that they couldn't be saved, like this last dasha, which was that of Sagittarius, Shula dasha. And all I'm showing you here is the transit chart when the dasha began. Your means of having a backup to confirm when do you think this problem is serious or not. Open the chart for the dasha, the transit chart for the dasha. I say annual because it's the same as the solar return chart. We only see it not every year. With that, thank you for listening. I have some upadesha. Check the Mahadasha for dangers like I showed you. Confirm with the transit chart when the dasha begins. As Freedom has expressed, try to confirm the year with another dasha. For example, we have a dasha called Chakra Dasha. I can pinpoint the exact year. Maybe you'll use Vimshotri Dasha if you're comfortable. Try to pinpoint the month by using the annual chart. You can draw an annual chart also, right? If you're using annual charts, you can also see which months the events are happening in for each year. We like to use Tithi Pravesh in our tradition. Whatever is the case, consider advising the Mrityunjaya mantra to appease the difficulties. And if they can't do the mantra themselves, advise them to have a priest perform a Mrityunjaya Havan before the dasha begins, because if you can do it before the dasha begins, you can correct a lot of issues. Thank you for listening. And I hope that was not too fast. Know that you can just go into the chat to find the actual slides. And if you have any feedback, of course, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Visti G. It's so exciting to hear your presentation. I loved what you said about how you go about choosing what you want to present based on what you really want to get into. And I was excited to hear about Shula Dasha because really getting into medical astrology and longevity, it's an incredibly profound method and really gave me some great insights. And what a powerful example with Betty Ford, a pioneer of modern rehabilitation from drug addiction and alcoholism, and one of the proponents for Alcoholics Anonymous. Really powerful soul. Would any of the Jyotisha here like to comment on Visti G's presentation? Thank you, Visti G. So now we have the always lovely Eve Mendoza, who is going to present on a predictive technique using Nakshatra Dasha Lord. Welcome, Eve.
Thank you. May I share my screen, please?
Yes, you may.
Hey guys, I'm
Eve,
ready.
Eve, your microphone is a little low.
Oh, should I get closer?
Oh, that's better. That's
better.
better.
Just digesting a tremendous amount. Thank all of you. Truly rooted in your own wisdom. It's beautiful and really profound from many angles. I just want to start with bringing forward Shakti, actually. Without her, there's no power to grow. The seed can't grow. And we're discussing time and karma palam. The fruits of karma only grow because of her. So I just want to open. Om Aim Saraswati Nama. Aim Guru Saraswati Nama. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara. Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Sri Guruve Nama. I also want to bow to all traditions that I am too ignorant to understand. And I do want to honor Sanjay Ratji's parampara right now, because I have learned and I'm continuing to learn. I'm still very ignorant, so much. I wouldn't have imagined Many of you often ask me about books on nakshatras, so this time I wanted to recommend and show you there is a book from the tradition that's absolutely beautiful. One thing I really appreciate about the tradition is the purity and the devotion. I have never heard Sanjay Ji speak without devotion. And that to me caught my attention. And I've also noticed that for any of you who have studied Devi Mahatmyam or anything, I mean, any of these sacred mantras, any of these shlokas, they'll often have a prayer of forgiveness, which we skip over because none of us know mantra. What do we know? We can say the sound. What do we know? You know, I can't say I know anything. So that prayer of forgiveness becomes most important for me. But you'll also find multiple times guhya, hidden, secret. And I love that in this tradition, there's a structure, but so much is unspoken. And there's a profound depth. So I just wanted to honor that properly this time. I'm very grateful. And I'm not sure that I'm adhikari, as Parashara says you should be to learn astrology, but you'll forgive me, be protected from my ignorance as I share a little about my limited understanding on nakshatras. A lot of this is from experience. I did live with a teacher in India for many years. It was more of a spiritual teacher, but he would open up about these things occasionally. I mean, my job was massaging his feet and getting his food and taking care of his medicines. So you're actually talking to a nurse right now, more than a Jyotishi. But I just have this devotion to this, and I don't, I've never been able to explain it. So let's just start with the nakshatras and the moon. Let's just start there, because before we get into dissecting everything, let's understand its life. Let's understand also its function. Proteins in medical, but our proteins are an actual shape of their function. So the specificity here becomes important. Not only the intuition and all of these things that people often get into with Jyotish, but the honor of the mechanics. And in order to honor the mechanics, we have to have some kind of life, to understand that it's a life form, it's living somehow. So Mahakal is living. And this portion of Lord Shiva, this portion of Ma Kali, this portion of time that we call Vimshotri Dasha or Nakshatra Dashas, they are exactly that, guys. They are Nakshatra Dashas, it says it. The translation in Brihat Shastra is terrible, so I posted the Sanskrit for those of you who want to look at it. But he explains here in a nutshell that it is a Nakshatra Dasha. So what I hear a lot is the use of Rashis, the overcompensation with Rashi in Nakshatra Dashas, because people have not devoted themselves to lunar Jyotish. We have many brilliant Suryas, many brilliant gurus, Buddhas, and Shakti tends to get a little, she's very secret in a way, even though she's everything, and she's responsible for all movement and all growth and all of this. We almost don't see her. And she's very present in the nakshatras. They are the wives of Chandra. They are Shaktis, even though we attribute them to Rig Vedic deities in many cases. This may even be for remedial purposes. I say this, I may be ignorant, but in my years of study, over 20 years, and has been very devoted to nakshatra, and I'm very private. I have to suggest we should investigate as a team. We don't need to be kicking each other down and talking about this person follows this and this person said that and they're wrong. Why waste your breath? Everyone has a vidya of some sort, and they may have something valid to say. And we have not investigated what these nakshatras really are. Not even the basic, the devotion, the shlokas related to them. So it is like they are Shaktis. They are Shaktis. They are wives of Chandra. But then you have this mysterious element of the Devata or the Devi, like Aditi for Punarvasu, linked with this. And for those of you who don't read scripture, Shastra, you know, in this world, guys, I'm very discouraged to teach Jyotish if I have to be truthful. I find a lot of people, technique. What are you going to do? You're going to get a bunch of things wrong. You're going to confuse someone's life. And you're so worried about like making this prediction, you haven't even checked in with your deeper intelligence. And deeper intelligence comes from slowing down, becoming receptive, accepting that everything you understand, you probably misunderstand, and finding devotion, even if it kills you. Oh, I just want to predict this. I want to skip over all of this stuff. When Jaimini himself even says that you will, in his Mimamsa sutras, he says you won't understand anything, he says, unless you're a priest. He says that. You guys can all check it out. So these shastras, they're important. Our character is important. It's important. So with nakshatras, when we're dealing with Shakti, we're actually dealing with a strong potency. And it's almost better that we don't know them if we're going to, in any way skip over. Assume that we are already advanced enough to skip over respecting a guru, to skip over respecting the devatas, to skip over the necessary steps that's going to make you a fit Jyotishi in the first place, to even lay your drishti, your eyes on a person's chart. To the earlier points about people being fearful of dashas. Many times this is because of the Jyotishi. So I would like to just say before, I don't even care if I get into prediction because of how often I have to answer questions about how do you predict? How do you predict? I don't even know if the person's done 108 mantras in their life. I don't even know. I asked them about a shastra, about a certain devata. They don't know. No one knows Vishaka's linked with with Kartikeya. This is in Puranas. It's in Purans. It's in his 108 names. Vishaka is one of his names. Okay, this is important. This is important. Okay, all of these little things, critical. Now, Vishaka is a wife of Chandra, but there's a devata, Indragni, which some people say is lightning. But if we knew the story of Kartikeya, how he became Vishaka, then we understand why Indragni is there. So there's a lot of little things. These nakshatras that are linked with Mangal or Kartikeya, there's a group of them, and they're a little dangerous for the person's life even. You don't want to be scaring people when you learn this, and you need to know the techniques, because Kartikeya is Lord of Akala Mrityu, early death. We pray to him not to take our children. So those kinds of those nakshatras are important to be intimate with, to understand. So, as I always say, it all begins with a seed. And so if we planted a mango tree, we're going to get a mango tree. Now, how does it work in Vimshotri? How does it work in a nakshatra dasha? Well, we have to understand that there is an overlord, an overpowering energy over each nakshatra dasha, and parameters and laws and rules, natural order, natural law, to use these nakshatra dashas. And when we do, it mentions nothing of the Rashi. Okay, go through and read the Sanskrit. It, you know, here we go. Ashtotri commences from Ardra Nakshatra. Rudra commences from Rudra. Vimshotri commences from Kritika. Moon is Ucha and Kritika. All humans, Janma. Just like Vishtiji was saying, moon gives body. Moon gives, the moon is the movie of your life, and projection after, we're all eclipsed. We'll talk bad to someone with an eclipse in their chart, but we are all eclipsed by multiple images the moon is giving all the birth to these images all the time. We're all eclipsed. So this Vimshotri is very much linked with Guru because of something secret. And then it's also the nakshatra where moon is Ucha. And it applies to all humans because we are moon. We increase, decrease, that's it. Take another birth. We mimic the moon in every way. We don't want to be vulnerable, but we are. We are moon. So Vimshotri applies to everyone. Now, Ashtotri, Shodashotri, I have just little things here for you guys. You can find it in Brihad or Shastra. And pay attention to the rule and the nakshatra, because it's going to teach you nakshatras. All you got to do is pay attention. No one even needs to tell you. You've got your own intelligence. So many of these, like this Dwadashotri, Revati, where Shukra is Ucha, Navamsha Lagna and Shukra Rashi. That's the qualification for this. Now, you know, if you know nakshatras very well, you can see the pada of the nakshatra and construct the entire navamsha. So I don't need to see the navamsha because of that. So you know that it can only fall in you can only fall in Shukra with these nakshatras. It's not possible other ways. So these are the only nakshatras that can be under this dasha. The lagna would have to be in these specific nakshatras and that specific pada. And then this dasha will apply to you. Okay, and it's read in reverse order. Shukra has a reverse pole. He's backwards, he's upside down, inhaling smoke. So please pay, I only put this here for you guys. Look at this Swati. Look at this dasha here. Swati, the 8 directions, Vayu, blowing in every direction. What's the qualification? Who's Nietzsche there? Surya. What's the qualification? Surya in the 10th. 10th Lord in the 10th house. So it's that same thing with Surya with direction, the 10th house. Sorry, there's another one with Surya in the Lagna. But this one, Surya in the, 10th Lord in the 10th. That directional strength. This dasha is all about that. And Surya is a very interesting graha here. So yeah, so you leave out Shukra in the one that's reversed because Shukra is most likely the Lord of that dasha system. Okay, so a lot of little simple hints like that. We've got this one with the Surya and the Lagna, Ashwini Kumars, Sun is Ucha in Ashwini. The dasha commences from Guru. It's one of the rare ones where the dasha commences from anything but the sun. The sun is our natural nakshatra. It's our natural star, Yogatara. And so most of the nakshatra dashas do whatever nakshatra kicks it off. It'll be the sun activating that nakshatra, but there's a couple of them that it changes, and this one is one of them. So let's go into just a few little ways that you can read this. And I do lay my ignorance at the feet of Ma. And I just lay it for all of you to test it. Just try it. And I'm happy to be wrong. And it's a simple thing. But over the years, I've noticed that if you can't teach it to a child, sometimes I wonder about it. How complex we must become. So let's take Guru. I have here Guru Mahadasha. Now we know that moon is Janma and it starts Vimshotri, right? It says Janma Nakshatra. It kicks off the dasha system. Now what happens when you go into the next dasha? Through my observation, that dashapati becomes the temporary Janma Nakshatra, meaning it is now the Chandra Lagna. It's now going. Why do you think Rishi Parashara says, look what's in the 12th from the Dasha Lord, look what's in the 2nd from the Dasha Lord? These guys give hints. They're not always spelling everything out for us. Are you kidding? Rishi Parashara, he said that you shouldn't even be studying this if you're not qualified. Do you know his qualifications? Most of us in the modern time, it's nearly impossible to have that character. Do you really think he wrote you think he wrote a book and gave you all the secrets, just spelled it out? You have to be worthy. Ma doesn't open to just anyone. She only opens to Shiva. We have to be worthy of this. And I know I'm not. So that's why I'm saying I've seen these little things. Now, Rishi Parashara gives us these little hints. So we look 12th from Dasha Lord, 2nd from Dasha Lord. We look at the placement of the grahas from Dasha Lord. Why? It's pregnant with the karma palam, that the nakshatra is, that it's aligned with. And that graha is going to be its husband, is how I should say it. Temporary Chandra. It is going to make a baby. And that baby, you're either going to like it or you're not going to like it, because, you know, it depends on what's really going on. But either way, the graha is the generative principle. It is becoming the temporary Janma Nakshatra. And it starts giving birth. It starts producing. The nakshatra starts producing based on the personality and the quality of the graha. Not only that, anyone else who is in that graha's jurisdiction. So let's say Jupiter, then if we've got a planet sitting in Punarvasu, Guru has full jurisdiction over that graha. He says, hey, it's your time, start producing, you know, start producing the fruit. So if it's Ketu, then Ketu sitting in Punarvasu, the fruits of Punarvasu will come according to Ketu being the husband, the Dashapati. Okay, really simple. This is such a simple thing. You could almost show a child, and I feel like many people will just dismiss it because it's not mathematic enough. I'm not doing equations here. This is really simple, but you can tell so many little things even by using just you got to know the nakshatras though, guys. You can't just go, oh, Ketu and Punarvasu, so I'm going to get the fruit of Ketu. What's Punarvasu? Have you taken the time to know? What does that nakshatra do? I'm not talking about Tarabala, like where is its position from Janma Nakshatra or Dashapati. I mean, that stuff is significant, by the way. That's getting more technical. You don't even need to get that technical at this point to start developing reverence for these nakshatras. Just think of Ketu as the husband and Punarvasu as the wife, and there is going to be a child that comes out of that, as simple as that. Just start there. And if the graha happens to be a karka, like Atma Karka, Matya Karka, Dara Karka, just pay attention. Just pay attention to the karka and the nakshatra. You almost you can tell so much if you understand. Now the pada becomes important because that's the tattva. Okay, that's going to give a tattva element, and the entire Navamsha appears to be constructed off of Navamshas, even though there's calculations for it and nakshatras. So you've got the Agni, Prithvi, Vayu, and Jala. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like the nakshatras, it just goes around and it makes a Navamsha. Very, very, very simple when you learn it. The first portion will be Brahma Trimurti up to Cancer. The next portion is Vishnu Trimurti up to Scorpio. And then the next portion is Shiva Trimurti. And I mean, you can easily figure this out. So I do have a chart this time, and I feel so reluctant to go into some of this, but this is one of my favorite. I love this. His mind feels so pure to me when I look at his chart. He struggled with, this is Srinivasa Ramanujan, brilliant mathematician. He wasn't only logic, okay? As Rabindranath Tagore would say, a mind all logic is like a knife all blade. It cuts the hand that tries to wield it. It's probably said much more beautiful in Bengali, but that's my understanding of the translation. So he received visions from his village goddess, who is Mahalakshmi. And if you just look at his chart like a child, just look at that beautiful, that little 5th house. Just look who's in his 5th house. Just look, you know, he received, you know, visions from Mahalakshmi and Narasimha, because this specific village, there's a lot of stories around Narasimha, Hanumanji, and Lakshmi. And still to this day, they are going through his notebooks. He was a genius because of his receptivity and his imagination and creativity with mathematics. He was one of a kind. The professors at Cambridge said it, but his life purpose destroyed him in a sense. It's a very interesting chart because it really uprooted his health. He was Brahmin, strictly Brahmin. He even had an odd kind of surgery, I think, from withholding brahmachari with his wife. Like he had problems with his genitals, you know, like all kinds of, like he was very strict. He was a strict vegetarian. So he went to London, and of course that was a hard negotiation. It was a difficult negotiation with his health. His health was already kind of fragile. And if you can see this chart, any of you who have basic knowledge can see that the health of this person would be fragile. Now, where do nakshatras come in? I just want to show you guys a little bitty simple thing of what I was referring to. And this is like a real starting point. This is definitely not the depth, but to start allowing you to feel a little devotion towards these nakshatras and reverence that you don't have to overcompensate with Rashi all the time. And this is, I feel that's happening with all masculine things in a way. Surya, we respect timeliness and mechanics and sharpness, and there's almost no room for being gentle and slow and receptive and wrong. God forbid you're wrong. You know, you have to act like an authority all the time. So I'm just kind of adjusting our hearts a little to this concept that there's some missing piece of Jyotish, and I'm definitely not intelligent enough to restore it. I'm just devoted enough to perhaps know that. That's what I'm saying. I'm not the intelligence behind it. I just know it. And nakshatras are part of that because we're using them in such a way that I'm always like, why do you have to use the Rashi so much? And you're counting all these numbers. It's like, wait, slow down, because these things are, no. It's either an abode of a devata or it's a shakti. So then approach it a little different. So if you guys can see, this looks rather small here. I want you to just look at the Dharakarka in his chart. And then look at when he got married. Okay, just look. Let's see if I can expand that for you. This shows up over and over and over. Okay, guys, like over and over and over. It's not some brilliant technique, or maybe it is. Just try it. Just try it. Now, how the quality of that marriage would be, what it would be, all of those things. This Mercury dasha is already full of problems. It's already full of problems with health. It's full of problems with money. If you know anything about Jyeshta Nakshatra, second pada, you'll know. That falls in a Makara Navamsha. Now, once again, you will not need a Navamsha in front of you. So that Mercury is in a Makara Navamsha. Okay. And, this is a rather difficult dasha for him, but classic, the move west to London. And even if we, not even west, just move to London, to a foreign land, look at 12th from the Dashapati. He moves to London right when he's Ketu Dasha, 12th. 12th from Dashapati. I mean, so many of these things, it's in so many charts that, and it's so simplistic that if we don't start investigating it, we're missing out on something of the beauty of nakshatras. And there's a reason why they're assigned, the nakshatras are assigned a temporary lord for the time period, a temporary husband, because that one's going to be performing that work. Now, another unique thing about this Ketu is that sun is in a Ketu nakshatra. So it has to give, that Ketu triggers the sun to give. Give what? Give things of Mula nakshatra. I mean, we talk, those of us who know about Ketu know that Ketu loves mathematics. I mean, this is when he shined. He got all of his visions through the Shukra Antardasha, of course, which was of Lakshmi and Narasimha. And so just lovely timing there. It's his Amatya Karaka. So he got a job promotion and he got his visions. These visions were of equations. Ma Lakshmi, not Ma Saraswati, and Narasimha, he said he had a vision of Narasimha writing in blood, in integrals. And he went and wrote it down immediately in his notebook. So these visions had purpose with his life mission, that Amatya Karaka, that profession that would later take him to a foreign land, which was really misfortunate for him. The sun is the GK. It was really a kind of a lack of fortune, truly, though he did live his life purpose. Even during this cycle, which is still this Ketu Shukra, his mother had a vision to stop preventing him from going to the West. She's strict Brahmin. She didn't want him to go. I mean, family members didn't even attend his funeral because of how orthodox, and she even had a vision of Lakshmi saying to let him do his life purpose. So this is I cannot bring myself to show some things. Please forgive me. It is not withholding. I feel that my teacher used to say, things that are given in silence remain in silence. And this is enough to where if you understand a little of this, if you have the intelligence to work with it, you will see something. You don't need to with the nakshatra dasha only. I'm not saying with other dashas. Some of the Rashi dasha techniques have blown my mind. I really, I almost feel overwhelmed with the tradition because of how profound. So please, I'm not discounting Rashis at all. I even would still use bhavas, but I used to read off of a nakshatra wheel by itself. And that's how I knew. I would go in blind. I wouldn't know anything about the person, and I would read off of nakshatra wheel itself. I would use bhavas admittedly, because directions, 10th, 4th, 1, 7, those very important places. So I would use above, below, setting and rising. Just like nature gives us these taras. So now the death in Shukra, I mentioned that the nakshatra dashas or nakshatras linked with Kartikeya are akala mrityu nakshatras. I want you to do homework and go through people that get assassinated. You are going to find, I'm going to give you, I guess I'll give you 4 nakshatras with this. It won't tell a lot. You'll have to do a lot more work to see how it works. But I want you to just see something. You have to look at transits at the time of death. You have to do your homework. Look at the Vimshotri Dasha. Question the year, guys. The old school astrologers, 360 is a very perfect number. Sun moves a degree a day. I sometimes wonder if science is ruining us because it's telling us something, but how much is it robbing? Old school astrologers used to make brilliant predictions with 360 days. It's a perfect number. Anyway, play with that. Play with that. Please, devote yourself. So early death, Vishaka, surprise. No, not a surprise. Vishaka, Kritika, Dhanishta. If Bharani is involved, it can make it more certain. I just want to say that. Vishaka, Kritika, Dhanishta. These 3. If Bharani is involved, be careful. If a person has more than one of these, just watch it. Just watch it. For those of you who rely heavily on Rashi, which I'm continuing to learn from you guys, and I don't want to open my mouth about it because I'm too ignorant. I know I am. Try looking at things from nakshatras for about 2 weeks. Look at Akala Mrityu. It's one of the ones that's very interesting. Mangal must be involved. He must be involved. He is the Lord Mangal. He's the Lord of this. So if you don't understand those nakshatras, and see there's nakshatras of dhana, of wealth, nakshatras of partnership, bhakti, the Falgunis. The Falgunis, they're very interesting nakshatras. You see someone like Prabhupada has his Venus, I believe, in Uttara Falguni, full of devotion. Full of devotion. He is debilitated, but full of devotion. So there are these pairs and these groups, and they are definitely going to deliver that. Now, what the Devata is, whether it is remedial or not, I'm too ignorant. But I'll also just let you guys, take a screenshot of this. I won't go into this too much, but this is an alternate dasha with Surya in the Lagna. And here you have dashapatis changing, right? So here Guru commences it, right? Because Surya can't. He's the criteria of the dasha. He can't commence it. There seems to be some rule with that. And, Bruce Lee's almost entire success was through Guru. He's another early death. And we have the play of 2 of those nakshatras at work again. And they were triggered at the time of his death, just like with Srinivasa Ramanujan. It is not enough to make the prediction, so I don't feel wrong for sharing it. It's not enough. Someone would have to really devote some time to that, but it is enough for reverence. First of all, I choose a Kalamrityu here for us to understand the gravity of what we're doing. We're talking to people about their lives, big life decisions, their well-being, and what we say affects them. We can scare them so badly. So this topic actually has gravity, and it will take a mature person and a person very devoted to figure that out. But those are the nakshatras that deal with it. So this is one of these that you can see Jupiter would give the success. I would be tempted to ask you guys to turn the chart from the Dashapati and examine the chart and look at the life events. Now I do have Vimshotri over here as well. And once again, you're going to find a lot of those karakas. If you just find his chart and then look at this, you're going to find a lot of those karakas at work. And his death was mysterious. I mean, it was a stroke. It was, you know, it was swelling in the brain. But, you know, who knows? He had a lot of threats. It was a very strange scenario. And because he still has family living, I want to be respectful to that. So it's just an interesting chart to examine because the nakshatras here play a huge role in his life. As a matter of fact, when you're looking at a chart with a lot of big clusters, okay, I've heard a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh my God, I got this huge cluster. And I've been told, people look at it and they don't know what to do with it. I look at it and I don't see that because they have to all be in the same pada. They have to be really influencing each other in a different way for me to consider it in that way. Because the Navamsha, they're not going to stick together. They're not close enough. Now, when they're in the same pada, that means they're bound with the same tattva. And they're going to show up and they're going to have Brahma Trimurti, Vishnu Trimurti, or Shiva Trimurti activity that they're bound in with that tattva. And the Navamsha, the chart of fortune, is going to tell you that. So this big cluster, even his is interesting because none of them are in the same pada. None of them. So his Navamsha is completely different. You know, that Venus is in Sagittarius Navamsha. The moon is in Meena. You know, like if you just look here, then you've got the Budh is going to go into Aries Navamsha. You know, so they're actually very differently, they're influenced in a different way. Now these two are Agni, and Agni consumes. It's another thing. Agni consumes Jala. So he's got this Mercury here. This Mercury is a little strange in his chart. And Ramanujan also had Mercury Amakarka. It's a very interesting graha, to say the least. Mercury to me is fascinating. But it's in an Agni Tattva Navamsha in Vishaka. So it's, to me, I'm already paying attention to how much Mangal is happening in that Mercury. And so that Mercury was kind of instrumental there with some things that happened in his life that were very, very, very intense. And the Shukra has a hidden element of Agni, of course, too. And that's, you know, that's a carrier of Jala. So anyway, guys, I'm just, you know, you look at the Mangal, it's in that nice Makara Navamsha. So naturally martial artists, you know, all of that. So, but you can just go through and see through Nakshatra. And I use the Rashis in the Navamsha more from a Tattva level. And I've gotten really good results with that. I can't say I'm a huge fan of Ucha and Nicha. I love what Jaimini says that they, Ucha and Nicha, same thing. I don't know if he's just trying to confuse us, but I do find that when the graha is in the exact degree of the Ucha or Nicha, I do find. Okay, there's a reason. See, for me, it's the nakshatra. It is the nakshatra. It isn't, I don't find it the same when the graha's out of the nakshatra. You don't want Shukra trapped in architecture, chitra. You don't want the formless beauty of Jala trapped in the vanity of form, chitra. You want it released into the infinite, Revati, the formless. Like that. You don't want Surya, who consumes everything, in the sign of prana, Vayu. You don't want him consuming Vayu. Prana, you'll be dead. You want him in Ashwini. He's good there. Leave him there. You let him be the first one. He's singular. He likes it. Let him be first. Let Shani, who knows how to execute measurement, go into Vayu, prana. If Shani is in Vishaka or Chitra, in my experience, is not the same Ucha. It might be ignorant. But when you're using this for Nakshatra Dasha, I'm like the little mechanics here to keep boundaries, consider that there's something important with the function of the nakshatra alone, that it doesn't need perhaps other things to define it. Just like we use Rashi techniques, Rashi aspect, we're not looking at the Navamsha for that. It is a mechanic of using the Rashi aspect. Same thing a little bit with these degrees. I've always wondered, Brahaspati, he's the priest, Purohit. So he speaks the prayer, right? So he's Ucha in the Agni Tattva of Pushya. The priest keeps the fire. And then the prayer is heard by the ear of Vishnu directly across from Pushya. Vishnu is the ear. He's hearing the prayer directly across. Ashlesha, the star of attachment. Binding energy, winding and coiling, directly across from Dhanishta, the star of detachment. Shiva's Dhamru, his freedom. It all is there. They say book of life. And if you start looking, you'll see a lot just from doing this little tiny thing I'm suggesting. So, guys, I unless you have questions, I don't have any.
Thank you, Eve, so much for your elaboration on using Nakshatra Lord in the Dasha. Such a powerful point that we've discussed, just you and I, about the need for a re-emphasis on Nakshatra and Jyotish and the emotional, empathic side of things. It's just so nice to receive your wisdom, and as always, to experience your deep integrity and authenticity. So thank you, Eve. For the other.
May I say one thing too? Just quickly, I feel like the moon gets associated so much with emotion that I'd like to just gently say, Jaimini said, if the moon is involved in something, it will definitely happen. It's not just how we feel. So I think we make a little mistake with nakshatras that it's how we feel. And it is karma pala. It's actually going to happen. So I just want to say that because I'm noticing a lot in the language, and it's okay, but I think it's misleading all of us, including myself. I'll look at the moon and I'll be thinking this, of course, psychology and all of this. I mean, look at Shukra. Look at his avatar. Oops. Okay. I didn't want my big face. Can you see all of us?
Yeah, it's a gallery.
I don't want, I feel better with her up there, but yeah, so if you look at Shukra's avatar, Shukra's story, it's all psychological torment. He's definitely a graha of psychology. It's all very intense, his story. Chandra also very, very, very intense, the story. So there's definitely that Chandra Shukra fourth house element with psychology and our emotions. But I do think if the more you look, the more you're going to see how concrete, because we are the moon.
Just
Yeah.
just as you were saying that, we had 108 attendees in our. I thought
Yeah.
that-
I'm probably ignorant, so I hope all of you guys are protected from the severe ignorance that is happening over here. But I have to share the observation. I'm actually a very technical researcher, but I feel very uncomfortable about sharing a lot of it. I feel very uncomfortable. I still feel we are so impatient that, I mean, are we actually following what this Rishi said? And how much pop karma comes from that when we do this and then we don't? So I worry about that part.
Thank you, Eve. Any other Jyotisha like to comment or say any concluding remarks? Dr. Pai?
Presentation and very insightful research. And just to add to what she has mentioned about, she talked about 4 nakshatras, which are very key. She talked about Kritika, Vishaka. She also mentioned about Dhanishta, and she said about Bharani as well. And now, if you know the system of nakshatra-based, lunar-based astrology from Atharva Veda, it starts from Kritika, and the first leg of these nakshatras will end with Vishaka. And Vishaka would be the split that is happening between these nakshatras. You know, you have 13 nakshatras on one side of Vishaka and the 27 nakshatra scheme. And you have 13 nakshatras from Vishaka on the other side, which means starting from Anuradha, going up to Bharani. So this would be the starting point and the end point for the Deva Yana nakshatras, or the path of the Devatas, starting from Kritika, going up to Vishaka. And then we start with Anuradha, and then we end with Bharani. So Bharani and Kritika and Vishaka and Anuradha are like the beginning and start for 2 different systems. From Anuradha going to Bharani is called as Pitrayana nakshatras, which means it's the path of the ancestors, the Pitris. So I see these nakshatras playing a very pivotal role in our lives when we see that planets are coming into these nakshatras, as she mentioned. These are very, very key. And also what I've observed with, there is another pair that I would say, which is very, very key, which is Dhanishta and Shravishta. If you see from Vishaka, Shravana and Shravishta, which is Dhanishta, they become the Mitra and the Ati Mitra nakshatras from there.
Well, Dhanishta, because why? Why would it be a Kalamrityu?
Because of Mars.
Because it is Mangal Ducha. Any Agni consumes.
Exactly.
It's Mangal's Ducha. And yeah, there's other stories linked with it, including the murder of the children before Bhishma is born, the Vasus.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot of stories. So if we look at Dhanishta and we think, wealth, Dana, sure. But go look at Princess Di, go look at many charts with Dhanishta, look at it. Just look at it. It's a Very divine system. It's a very divine system, but we have to be careful. And then Garga Rishi also said these nakshatras aren't equal, which complicates everything. I think it's in his Brahma Samhita or Brahma. Oh God, because you can't really find it. I've gone on every website to find that more about this. It's very hard to find. So I'm not really satisfied with it. I've, researched it. Some things, yeah.
And just to add to what he was saying with these nakshatras, you also look at Sarvato Bhadra Chakra. You will see they will all have Veda to each other. Most of these nakshatras, either they would have direct or reverse or forward-looking Veda. These nakshatras are very key. So that's why I would say that what she mentioned, I'm just adding to what she said. And besides that, I've also seen the key is also with Ashlesha and Magha. So these would be, I would say, these 8 nakshatras would be very key. I'm just saying in general, I'm not saying with anything specific.
The nakshatras are like places of power dynamics. The sexual power dynamic is between Ashlesha and Magha. That's between the Pitris, the mothers and the fathers. The political power dynamic is between Jyeshta and Mula. And then the power dynamic with your physical body and life and death is between Ashwini and Revati. Revati's the hospital and the nurses. Ashwini's the emergency doctor. And if you don't believe me, once again, study charts, you'll see that the power dynamics in life happen in this Gandanta. And that's why humans notoriously don't do well with power. Why do you think the nodes are so hard for us? It's not because the nodes are dirty and this and that. That's our way of expressing it. Very high. They're very high, sacred devatas. But we don't do well with power. And so, Gandanta and nodes and some of these nakshatras like Jyeshta. Jyeshta is very severe. It's a very interesting nakshatra. And it requires someone to understand their potential. Vrishchika Rashi. Vrishchika Rashi is very interesting, the nakshatras in it. Very, very interesting. A lot of potential there. Tremendous potential is the reason they say it's a Brahmin. Tremendous potential, but it is handling a responsibility is what it is. It's a responsibility when you've got Shakti. Anything that's poisonous has great Shakti. That's how it kills you.
Great points, Evji. Just as a tip to all of the participants, also look at nakshatras and the birth star of the planets. They also would be key. Kritika is the birth star of moon. Bharani is the birth star of Rahu. Ashlesha is said to be the birth star of Ketu.
Depending on the Quran.
Yeah, depends on which Quran is it, because Narada Puran, Vamana Puran, there's different Purans will talk about different nakshatras. But I'll say, definitely look at those as well.
Yeah, guys, I feel really humbled to be here. I just thank you for having me. Thank you. I just hope we all can develop character. I really think that's the main thing. If I could just get on here and say that every time. I feel such love for the community, and I wish we'd all work together more and be less, I don't know. I just wish we wouldn't frighten people and gain some clarity by testing our clarity with each other, actually have some devotion towards this, not just, I don't know really what's happening in this world in general, so I should probably keep my mouth shut. but I feel grateful to be here. I feel grateful to even know the names of the grahas, okay? This is not modesty. I understand truly in my gut what it means to even know how to speak the names of the grahas in Sanskrit, how fortunate we are. So if I can even say their names properly, I'm lucky. So So thank you guys. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Vinci.
Thank you. I'd like to, was anyone else wanted to say anything?
Good to be with you all.
Good to be with you, Freedom. I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our panelists today, all of our attendees. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, thank you for taking the time to learn and enjoy this beautiful ancient science with us. I'd like to give a special thanks to Sam Geppi, who is not currently here. Thank him for his presentation, Eve Mendoza, Visti Larsen, Freedom Cole, Dr. Arjun Pai. Just a couple things I wanted to mention about some upcoming events. So on March 5th on my channel, Dr. Frawley and I, Vamadeva, are doing a collaboration on the integration of Ayurveda and Jyotish. And then in the end of March, on March 27th, there's going to be a Nakshatra Summit with Pundit Sanjay Roth, Camilla Sutton, Sam, Ian, Eve, and more to come. So thank you all for joining. Have a blessed day. Have a good sleep if it's late where you are. Have a good dinner. Have a good breakfast if it's the morning. Hari Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya.